The bitter wind howled across the empty plains carrying ice and fury. Snow swirled in violent eddies, erasing the world beyond a few feet of visibility. The stagecoach lurched through the growing drifts, its wheels struggling against the accumulating snow. Inside, Abigail Porter clutched her small medical bag to her chest, knuckles white with cold and fear. "How much farther to Red Pine?" she called to the driver, her voice nearly lost in the wind's wail. The reply came back fractured. "Can't say, ma'am. Trail's disappearing. Should never have left Cheyenne in this weather." Another violent lurch. The horses screamed. Then came the sickening tilt as the stagecoach slid sideways off what remained of the trail. Abigail felt herself thrown against the door, then airborne as the coach toppled into a snow-filled gully. Pain blossomed across her temple. Darkness threatened at the edges of her vision. Through the broken window, snow poured in like something alive, hungry. She heard the driver calling to the horses, his voice growing fainter. Then, nothing but the wind's mournful song. Abigail forced herself to move fingers, fumbling with her medical bag. A small lantern, matches, wrapped in oilcloth, her surgical scissors, to cut away the canvas of the overturned coach. Blood trickled warm down her cheek as she worked the cold, numbing her fingers until they felt like wooden appendages belonging to someone else. She found the driver half buried in snow, his leg bent at an unnatural angle. Despite her efforts, his pulse faded beneath her fingertips as the blizzard raged around them. Abigail whispered a prayer, then turned to face her own survival. The horses had broken free, disappearing into the white void. She gathered what supplies she could salvage: her medical bag, a woolen blanket from her trunk, a small wooden box wrapped carefully in oilcloth, and the letter that had brought her to this wilderness. The paper was already stiff with frost at the edges as she tucked it inside her coat, close to her heart. Using the broken pieces of the stagecoach for shelter, Abigail burrowed into the snow, creating a small cave against the wind. As darkness fell, the temperature plummeted further. She thought of Boston, of the hospital where she'd worked until its doors closed 2 months ago, of her sister's grave, the fresh dirt still unsettled when Abigail had stood there last making her decision. "I won't die here," she whispered to the darkness, her breath crystallizing in the frigid air. "Not before I fulfill my promise." The letter crinkled against her chest. She knew its contents by heart after reading it so many times during her journey west. "Dear Miss Porter, I write in response to your inquiry with the Western Bride Society. My name is Nathaniel Thorne, a carpenter with a small homestead 2 miles outside Red Pine, Wyoming territory. I have a daughter, Catherine, age 8, who has been without a mother for 3 years now. I can offer a sturdy home, honest work, and the promise that you will be respected as my wife and Catherine's mother. The winter is harsh, but spring in the mountains brings beauty that cannot be described, only witnessed. If you find these terms agreeable, passage can be arranged from Boston to Cheyenne, then by stagecoach to Red Pine. Please respond at your earliest convenience. Respectfully, Nathaniel Thorne. Simple words, plainly stated. Yet they had offered Abigail what Boston no longer could purpose: a future, a chance to start anew. After Emily's death, after the hospital closed, what choice did she have? 26 years old, unmarried, with skills that frightened as many as they impressed. A woman who had seen too much death during the war to be comfortable company in peaceful drawing rooms. Darkness deepened. The cold penetrated her makeshift shelter despite the blanket. Abigail forced herself to stay awake, knowing that sleep in such temperatures would be her last. She recited surgical procedures in her mind, listed bones and organs, recalled patients saved and lost. Anything to keep her mind active and blood flowing. Morning arrived with startling clarity. The blizzard had passed, leaving behind a transformed world of pristine white, silent and still. The sun reflected painfully off the snow as Abigail emerged from her shelter, disoriented and half-frozen. She stood knees trembling with cold and exhaustion. In every direction, nothing but white plains and distant dark smudges of pine forest. No sign of a road or trail. She had no idea which direction led to Red Pine. Clutching her medical bag and the small wooden box that contained her most precious possession, Abigail chose the direction where a thin line of forest seemed closest. Each step required deliberate concentration, her feet breaking through the crust of snow to sink shin-deep. The morning aged the sun climbing higher without offering much warmth. Abigail's lips cracked and bled. Her breath came in painful gasps. The weight of her medical bag grew unbearable, yet she refused to abandon it. Just as her strength began to fail, she caught sight of a dark figure moving across the snow. A horse and rider materializing like a mirage from between the trees. Abigail raised a hand, too exhausted to shout. For a terrible moment, she thought she'd gone unseen. Then the rider changed direction, heading straight toward her. The distance closed with agonizing slowness. Finally, the horse stood before her, steam rising from its nostrils. Its rider, a broad-shouldered man with a beard frosted white with ice, looked down at her from beneath a battered hat. "Lord Almighty," he said, dismounting with surprising grace for his size. "Where'd you come from, ma'am? Nothing's come through on the stage road since the storm hit." "The coach," Abigail managed her voice a cracked whisper. "Overturned yesterday. The driver dead." The man's face grew grim when she nodded. "I'm Thomas Wheeler Blacksmith in Red Pine. You're lucky I decided to check my trap lines this morning." Before Abigail could respond, her knees buckled. Thomas caught her with strong arms that smelled of smoke and iron. "Easy now. Let's get you warmed up before you tell me the rest." He lifted her onto his horse, then mounted behind her, wrapping a thick buffalo hide around them both. "Red Pine's just beyond those trees. You'll be safe now, Miss Porter," she whispered. "Abigail Porter." "Well, Miss Porter, you must have angels watching over you. Not many survive a night alone in a Wyoming blizzard." As the horse carried them toward the distant smudge of buildings, Abigail felt consciousness slipping. The last thing she remembered was clutching her small wooden box, ensuring it stayed secure within her coat.
John?
Red Pine, Wyoming Territory in December of 1878 was little more than a scattering of wooden buildings huddled together against the wilderness. A general store, a blacksmith's forge, a small church, a saloon, and 24 houses connected by snow-packed paths rather than proper streets. Abigail woke in a small room above the blacksmith shop, the air warm and heavy with the scent of coal and hot metal from below. A gray-haired woman with kind eyes was placing another log in the small stove. "There you are," the woman said, noticing Abigail's open eyes. "I'm Martha Wheeler Thomas's wife. You've been asleep since he brought you in yesterday." "Yesterday?" Abigail tried to sit up, then winced as pain bloomed across her temple. "Easy now. You've got a nasty cut there, though. I cleaned it best I could. Thomas says you're lucky to be alive." Memory returned in fragments. The overturned stagecoach, the driver's fading pulse, the long night buried in snow. "My belongings," Abigail began. "Safe and sound." Martha gestured to the corner where Abigail's medical bag and the wooden box sat atop her small trunk. "Thomas rode out with some men to recover what they could from the coach. They buried the poor driver and brought back your things." Relief flooded through her. "Thank you. I can't begin to repay your kindness. No need for that. Martha poured a cup of steaming broth and helped Abigail sit up to drink it. Though I am curious what brings a lady like yourself to Red Pine, especially in December. Abigail hesitated, then reached for her coat draped at the foot of the bed. From the inner pocket she withdrew the letter, now wrinkled and water-stained, but still legible. "I've come to marry Nathaniel Thorne," she said, surprised at how the words caught in her throat. "He has a homestead outside town with a daughter named Catherine." Martha's expression shifted, something unreadable passing behind her eyes. "I see," she said after a moment. "Nathaniel's place is about 2 miles north of town. A fine carpenter, keeps to himself mostly. His wife Hannah passed some years back." "Yes," the letter mentioned his daughter has been motherless for 3 years. Martha nodded slowly. "Catherine's a special child, bright as a new penny. Looks just like her mother around the eyes." She stood smoothing her apron. "You rest today. Thomas can take you out to the Thorne place tomorrow, if the weather holds." That night, lying in the small bed beneath thick quilts, Abigail held the wooden box on her chest, running her fingers over its polished surface. She opened it carefully, and soft music filled the room, a delicate melody she knew by heart. Her sister's music box, the last gift from their father before he died. Emily had loved this melody, had hummed it during her final days as consumption slowly claimed her. If only Abigail had recognized the symptoms sooner. If only she hadn't been so absorbed in her work at the hospital. If only... She closed the box, silencing the music. Regrets would not bring Emily back, just as they would not bring back the countless soldiers she couldn't save during the war. All she could do now was move forward, fulfill her purpose, find a new beginning in this harsh, beautiful wilderness. Tomorrow she would meet Nathaniel Thorne and his daughter. Tomorrow she would begin whatever life awaited her as a frontier wife. She traced her finger over the letter one more time before folding it away. Sleep came slowly, accompanied by the distant howl of wolves beyond the town's edges. Morning brought clear skies and bitter cold. Thomas Wheeler helped Abigail into his small sleigh, tucking buffalo robes around her legs, while Martha added a stone hot from the forge to keep her feet warm. "Road to Thorne's place should be passable," Thomas said, checking the harness on his sturdy dray horse. "Snow's deep, but packed down enough for the runners." "I've already sent word with young Billy that you're coming," Martha added, handing Abigail a basket covered with a cloth. "Some bread and preserves, a small welcome gift." "Thank you both," Abigail said, emotion tightening her throat. "I don't know what would have happened if—" "No need for that," Thomas interrupted gently. "We look after our own here in Red Pine. Soon enough, that'll include you." As they pulled away from the blacksmith's shop, Abigail felt the town's few residents watching. A woman swept the boardwalk in front of the general store, pausing to study the sleighs. 2 men outside the saloon tipped their hats with curious expressions. "Don't mind them," Thomas said, following her gaze. "New faces are rare in winter, especially a young lady's. Word travels fast in a small town." "They know where I'm going, why I'm here," Thomas chuckled. "Most likely, though I'd wager there'll be some surprise when you arrive at Thorne's place." Something in his tone made Abigail look at him sharply. "Why do you say that?" The blacksmith's expression became carefully neutral. "Just that Nathaniel keeps to himself mostly. Been that way since Hannah passed." Before Abigail could question him further, the sleigh rounded a bend and left the small town behind. The landscape opened into a vast white plain dotted with stands of pine. Mountains rose in the distance, their jagged peaks scraping a sky so blue it almost hurt to look at it. The silence felt profound after the constant noise of Boston, No carriages, no street vendors, no press of humanity. Just the soft shush of sleigh runners on snow and the rhythm of the horses' hooves. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Thomas said, noticing her wide-eyed gaze. "Different kind of beauty than back east, I imagine." "Yes," Abigail breathed. "It feels untouched somehow." "That it is, though it tries its best to touch you back, usually with teeth or claws." He chuckled at his own joke. "Winter's the hardest time. Food gets scarce, temperatures drop so low your breath freezes in your beard. But come spring," he smiled beneath his frost-rimmed mustache, "well, that makes the struggle worthwhile." They traveled in companionable silence for a time, the sleigh following what Abigail assumed was a road, though it appeared indistinguishable from the surrounding terrain beneath its blanket of snow. "There it is," Thomas said, eventually pointing ahead. "Thorne's place." Abigail leaned forward, heart quickening. A small homestead appeared in the distance, a modest log house with a gently sloped roof, currently laden with snow. Smoke rose in a thin column from the stone chimney. Behind the main house stood a small stable, and what appeared to be a workshop. The entire property was nestled at the edge of a pine forest that stretched up into the foothills. As they drew closer, Abigail noticed details: the careful construction of the porch that wrapped around two sides of the house, the neatly stacked firewood beneath a lean-to, the carved shutters flanking each window. Everything spoke of skilled hands and attention to detail. The sleigh crunched to a halt in the swept yard. Before Thomas could help her down, the front door opened. A tall man stepped onto the porch, wiping his hands on a cloth tucked into his belt. His face was partially obscured by a neatly trimmed beard, but Abigail could see deep-set blue eyes studying her with obvious confusion. Thomas helped her from the sleigh. "Nathaniel," he called, "got someone here to see you. This is Miss Abigail Porter. Nearly lost her in the blizzard 2 days back." The man, Nathaniel Thorne, stepped down from the porch slowly, his gaze never leaving Abigail's face. He was lean rather than broad, with carpenter's hands, and the straight posture of a man accustomed to physical labor. A scar traced a pale line from his left temple into his hairline. "Miss Porter," he said, his voice deep and cautious. "You've come from Boston," she supplied, suddenly aware of how she must look after her ordeal. She straightened her borrowed coat. "In response to your letter." Nathaniel's brow furrowed. "My letter." Before Abigail could respond, a small voice called from the doorway. "Is she here? Is she the one?" A girl of about 8 appeared on the porch, her dark hair in 2 short braids, cheeks flushed with excitement. She wore a simple woolen dress and knitted stockings with a too large sweater that must have belonged to her father. Her eyes, the same deep blue as Nathaniel's, widened at the sight of Abigail. "You came!" she exclaimed, flying down the steps. "You really came!" Nathaniel caught his daughter by the shoulders before she could crash into Abigail. "Catherine," he said, his voice carrying a warning. "What do you know about this?" The girl looked up at her father, a mixture of defiance and guilt crossing her face. "I did it, Papa. I wrote to the lady company in Boston." A heavy silence descended, broken only by the soft nickering of Thomas's horse. Abigail felt a cold that had nothing to do with the winter air. She reached into her coat, withdrawing the letter with trembling fingers. "You didn't write this?" she asked Nathaniel. He took the letter, scanning its contents with growing disbelief. "No, ma'am, I did not." His gaze shifted to his daughter, who was now studying her boots intently. "Catherine Grace Thorne, what have you done?" The girl raised her chin, a picture of childish determination despite her father's stern tone. "You needed a wife, and I needed a mother. Miss Eliza showed me the magazine with the bride company. I took one of your papers and copied your writing. Thomas Wheeler cleared his throat. Perhaps I should head back to town now. Nathaniel ran a hand through his hair, clearly struggling between anger and embarrassment. No, stay a moment, Thomas. He turned back to Abigail. Miss Porter, I don't know what to say. I'm sorry for the deception, though I had no part in it. Abigail felt the ground shift beneath her. All the careful planning, the long journey, the night in the blizzard, all because of a child's deception. She swallowed hard, forcing composure into her voice. I understand, Mr. Thorne. Clearly there's been a misunderstanding. Catherine stepped forward, breaking free from her father's hold. But you can still stay, can't you? You came all this way. She looked up at Abigail with pleading eyes. Did you bring anything for headaches? Papa gets them something awful, and the store medicine doesn't help much. Catherine, Nathaniel admonished, but Abigail raised a hand. It's all right. She knelt to the child's level despite the protest of her cold, stiffened joints. I was a nurse during the war, and after. I have medicines for many ailments. Catherine's face lit up. See, Papa? She's perfect. Nathaniel's expression darkened. Go inside now, Catherine. We need to discuss this with Mr. Wheeler. The girl's face fell, but she obeyed, casting one last hopeful glance at Abigail before disappearing into the house. When she was gone, Nathaniel turned to Thomas. Can you take Miss Porter back to town? I'm sure Martha can help her arrange passage back east when the weather permits. Thomas shifted uncomfortably. Trails to Cheyenne won't be clear for at least 2 weeks, Nathaniel. Not after that blizzard. There must be somewhere she can stay until then. Abigail found her voice. Mr. Thorne, I don't mean to impose, but I've traveled quite far. I've sold my home in Boston. I have nowhere to return to. Nathaniel's expression remained closed. I'm sorry for your difficulties, Miss Porter, but I did not invite you here. I cannot be responsible for... The wind picked up suddenly, cutting through Abigail's coat. In the distance, dark clouds were gathering over the mountains. Another storm coming, Thomas observed. Won't make it back to town before it hits. He looked meaningfully at Nathaniel. Wouldn't be right to attempt it. Nathaniel's jaw tightened as he glanced at the approaching clouds. After a long moment, he nodded once curtly. You can stay until the storm passes, Miss Porter. I have a small sewing room off the kitchen. It's not much, but there's a cot. Thank you, Abigail said quietly. Thomas helped bring her trunk and bags onto the porch. I'll come back when the weather clears, he promised. Then, with a significant look at Nathaniel, do right by her, Thorne. As the sleigh pulled away, Abigail stood on the porch beside a man who clearly wished she were anywhere else. Snow began to fall, delicate flakes that belied the storm's approach. You'd better come inside, Nathaniel said finally. Catherine will be beside herself with excitement, despite the trouble she's in. He held the door for her, and Abigail stepped into the home that only hours before she had believed would be hers. The interior of the Thorne home was surprisingly warm both in temperature and appearance. The main room served as both kitchen and living area, dominated by a large stone fireplace where a kettle hung over glowing coals. A sturdy table with 4 chairs occupied one corner, while a small sitting area with 2 rocking chairs faced the fire. Shelves lined one wall filled with books, more than Abigail would have expected in a frontier home. Everything spoke of careful craftsmanship, the smooth planed floorboards, the carved mantelpiece, the elegant curves of the rocking chairs. This was not just a house, but a home, built by skilled hands. Catherine sat at the table, chin propped on her hands, her expression brightening when Abigail entered. Nathaniel followed, carrying her trunk with ease. The sewing room is through there, he said, nodding toward a doorway covered by a heavy curtain. I'll bring in more firewood. The stove in there hasn't been lit in some time." While he stepped back outside, Catherine approached Abigail cautiously. "Are you very angry?" she asked. "About the letter?" Abigail considered the child before her not just the architect of a deception that had altered the course of her life, but a girl who had lost her mother and taken extraordinary measures to fill that void. "I'm not angry," she said finally. Surprised, certainly, but not angry. Relief washed over Catherine's face. "I knew you'd understand. Are you really a nurse? Can you fix people like doctors do?" "In many ways, yes. I worked in a hospital in Boston until recently." "Mama died of lung sickness," Catherine said matter-of-factly, though her eyes darkened with old grief. "The doctor from town came, but he couldn't help her." Before Abigail could respond, Nathaniel returned with an armload of firewood. He paused, taking in the scene before him. "Catherine, help Miss Porter get settled while I start the stove in the sewing room." His tone brooked no argument. The sewing room proved to be a small but pleasant space, with a narrow window overlooking the pines behind the house. A small cast-iron stove stood in one corner, and shelves lined with fabric thread and mending tools occupied another. The promised cot had been set up along one wall. Nathaniel knelt to light the stove, his movements efficient, but tension evident in every line of his body. When the fire caught, he stood careful not to meet Abigail's eyes. "It should warm up quickly. There's extra blankets in the chest there." He hesitated, then added stiffly, "We eat supper at 6. You're welcome to join us." "Thank you, Mr. Thorne." He nodded once, then left, closing the curtain behind him. Through the fabric, Abigail heard him speaking quietly but firmly to Catherine. Though she couldn't make out the words, the tone made clear that the girl was being reprimanded for her deception. Left alone, Abigail sank onto the edge of the cot, the events of the past days finally overwhelming her. The near-death experience in the blizzard, the rescue, and now this, a destination reached only to find herself unwelcome. She pressed her hands to her face, willing back tears of exhaustion and disappointment. No, she would not succumb to self-pity. She had survived worse: the chaos of battlefield hospitals, the loss of her sister, the closing of the Boston hospital that had been her purpose for so long. This was merely another obstacle to overcome. She unpacked her most essential belongings, including her medical bag. The familiar tools inside provided comfort: surgical scissors, rolls of clean bandages, bottles of tinctures and remedies she had prepared herself. Whatever happened next, these skills remained hers. The small music box she placed carefully on the room's single shelf, running her fingers over its polished surface. Emily had loved this melody, Shenandoah, an old folk tune their father had sung to them as children. The storm arrived in full force as darkness fell. Wind howled around the corners of the house, rattling the shutters. Snow accumulated quickly, transforming the window into a canvas of swirling white. Despite the inclement weather outside, the small room had grown pleasantly warm, testifying to the house's solid construction. At precisely 6 o'clock, a soft knock came at the curtained doorway. Catherine peered in, her earlier exuberance subdued but not extinguished. "Supper's ready," she said. "Papa made stew." Abigail followed the girl to the main room, where Nathaniel stood at the stove ladling thick stew into 3 bowls. The table had been set with simple but clean dishware, and a loaf of bread sat in the center beside a small crock of butter. The meal began in uncomfortable silence. Catherine kept glancing between the adults, her expression hopeful despite the tension. Finally, she could contain herself no longer. "Miss Porter, did you bring anything special with you from Boston?" Abigail, grateful for the break in silence, smiled at the girl. "A few things. Some books, my medical supplies, and a music box that belonged to my sister." "A music box?" Does it play a song? Catherine, Nathaniel interjected. Let Miss Porter eat in peace. It's all right, Abigail assured him. Yes, it plays a song called Shenandoah. It's about a river back east. Catherine's eyes widened. Mama used to sing that, didn't she, Papa? A shadow passed over Nathaniel's face. Yes, he said quietly. She did. Sensing the shift in mood, Abigail changed the subject. This stew is excellent, Mr. Thorne. You're a skilled cook, as well as a carpenter. Necessity teaches many skills, he replied, some of the stiffness leaving his shoulders. Though I'll admit, cooking isn't my favorite. Papa made the table, Catherine volunteered. And the chairs, and the rocking chairs, and the shelves, and my bed. He can make anything from wood. For the first time, Abigail saw a flicker of pride break through Nathaniel's reserve. Not anything, Katie, but I manage well enough. Better than well enough from what I can see, Abigail said, looking around the room with genuine appreciation. Everything here shows remarkable craftsmanship. Nathaniel studied her for a moment, as if trying to determine whether her compliment was sincere. Whatever he saw in her face must have satisfied him, for he nodded slightly before returning his attention to his meal. After supper, Catherine helped clear the table, moving with the practiced efficiency of a child long accustomed to household duties. While Nathaniel washed the dishes, the girl brought out a small slate and chalk. Papa gives me lessons every evening, she explained to Abigail. I'm learning multiplication now. That's impressive, Abigail said, noting the math problems already written on the slate. When I was your age, I found multiplication quite challenging. Really? Catherine looked pleased. I like it. It's like puzzles. For the next hour, Abigail sat by the fire while Nathaniel guided his daughter through her lessons. Despite his reserved demeanor with Abigail, he showed remarkable patience with Catherine, explaining concepts clearly and offering praise for correct answers. The girl clearly adored her father, beaming at each word of encouragement. When the lessons concluded, Catherine yawned widely, prompting Nathaniel to announce bedtime. The girl protested only briefly, before obediently retrieving her nightgown from a chest near the fireplace. I'll be in shortly to tuck you in, Nathaniel told her. Go on now. After Catherine disappeared through a door at the far end of the main room, an awkward silence descended. Nathaniel remained standing, one hand resting on the back of a chair, his expression unreadable. Mr. Thorne, Abigail began, feeling she must address the situation. I want to apologize for the intrusion. I had no idea. There's no need. He interrupted, his tone not unkind, but final. What's done is done. When the weather clears, we'll sort out your return journey. Yes, of course. She hesitated, then added, Your daughter is remarkable, resourceful and bright. Something softened in his eyes. Too resourceful at times, it seems, though I can't blame her entirely. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. She misses her mother. I've tried to be enough, but no one person can be everything to a child, Abigail said gently. Not even the most devoted father. Nathaniel considered her words, then nodded once. Perhaps. In any case, I should see to her now. Good night, Miss Porter. Good night, Mr. Thorne. As he walked to his daughter's room, Abigail returned to her temporary quarters. The storm continued its assault. But inside the small sewing room, she felt an unexpected sense of peace. Whatever came next, she had survived the immediate crisis. She was warm-fed and sheltered, no small blessing in this harsh wilderness. She prepared for bed, grateful for the woolen nightgown she'd packed. Just as she was about to extinguish the lamp, she heard a sound from the main room. The front door opening, letting in a brief howl of wind before closing again. Had Nathaniel gone out into the storm? Concerned, Abigail wrapped herself in a shawl and peered through the curtained doorway. The main room was empty, the fire banked for the night. The front door was indeed closed, but a dusting of snow on the floor suggested it had recently been opened. Returning to her cot, Abigail tried to dismiss her concern. Nathaniel Thorne was clearly a man accustomed to this environment. Whatever had drawn him outside was his business, not hers. Sleep came slowly, accompanied by the storm's wailing chorus. Abigail woke to darkness and a child's terrified screams. For a disorienting moment, she thought herself back in the hospital during the war, surrounded by wounded soldiers calling for their mothers. Then reality snapped into focus: the small sewing room, the dying embers in the stove, the continuing howl of the storm outside. And cutting through it all, Catherine's voice. "Mama, Mama!" Abigail was on her feet instantly. Shawl pulled around her shoulders as she pushed through the curtained doorway. The main room was dark, except for the faint glow of coals in the fireplace. Catherine's cries continued from behind the closed door of her bedroom. Hesitating only briefly, Abigail crossed to the door and opened it. Inside, Catherine thrashed beneath her quilt, eyes open but unseeing clearly, caught in the grip of a night terror. Of Nathaniel, there was no sign. "Catherine!" Abigail called, approaching the bed. "Catherine, wake up! You're dreaming!" The girl continued to cry out, reaching for something unseen. Abigail sat on the edge of the bed and gently took her shoulders. "Catherine," she said more firmly, "it's just a dream. You're safe." The child's eyes focused suddenly, tears spilling down her flushed cheeks. "Miss Porter." "Yes, I'm here. You were having a nightmare." Catherine threw herself into Abigail's arms with such force that it nearly knocked her backward. Small hands clutched at her nightgown as the girl sobbed against her chest. "She was coughing blood again," Catherine choked out. "Mama was coughing blood, and I couldn't help her." Abigail's heart constricted. She held the child close, rocking slightly. "It was just a dream, dear one. Just a dream." "But it wasn't," Catherine hiccuped. "It really happened." And then she was gone. Tuberculosis, Abigail thought, or pneumonia. Both took their victims with blood-tinged coughs in the final stages. "Where is your father?" she asked gently. "The workshop. He goes there when the headaches are bad." Understanding dawned. Nathaniel had gone to his workshop earlier not for work, but to suffer in private. "I'll stay with you until you fall asleep again," Abigail promised, stroking Catherine's hair. "Would you like that?" The girl nodded against her shoulder, her tears gradually subsiding. Abigail continued to hold her, humming softly. After a few minutes, she remembered her music box. "Would you like to hear the song your mother used to sing? I have a music box that plays it." Catherine pulled back, wiping her eyes. "Yes, please." Abigail retrieved the box from the sewing room and wound the small key. When she opened the lid, the delicate melody of Shenandoah filled the bedroom. Catherine's eyes widened with wonder, fresh tears gathering, but of a different sort now. "It sounds just like when Mama sang it," she whispered. Abigail sat beside her again, and Catherine leaned against her side, watching the small box with rapt attention. When the song ended, Abigail wound it once more, and then again until the girl's eyelids began to droop. "Lie down now," Abigail encouraged. "I'll stay right here." Catherine obeyed, allowing Abigail to tuck the quilt around her. "Will you tell me a story?" she asked sleepily. "About the stars. The stars. Mama said they were maps for lost people." Abigail smiled, stroking the girl's hair back from her forehead. Well, she was right about that. Sailors use stars to navigate across the ocean, and long ago, slaves escaping to freedom followed the North Star. "Like a map home," Catherine murmured, her eyes drifting closed. "Yes, like a map home." Abigail continued stroking her hair, weaving a quiet tale about stars guiding lost travelers until the child's breathing deepened into sleep. She remained seated on the edge of the bed, reluctant to leave in case the nightmares returned. The storm outside had lessened somewhat, the wind's howl reduced to a mournful moan. In that relative quiet, she heard the front door open and close. Nathaniel had returned from his workshop, easing herself carefully from the bed to avoid waking Catherine. Abigail slipped out of the bedroom. In the main room, Nathaniel stood by the fireplace, adding logs to rebuild the fire. He turned at the sound of her footsteps, surprise evident in his face. "Miss Porter, I thought you'd be asleep." "Catherine had a nightmare," she explained. "She was calling for her mother." Concern replaced surprise. "Is she all right?" "She's sleeping now. The music box helped. It plays the song her mother used to sing." Nathaniel looked away, but not before Abigail caught the flash of pain in his eyes. "Thank you for going to her. I was—" He trailed off, one hand rising unconsciously to his temple, where the scar disappeared into his hairline. "She said, you get headaches," Abigail ventured. "I have some remedies that might help." He shook his head slightly. "I've tried everything the general store sells." "My remedies aren't from any general store, Mr. Thorne. I prepare them myself based on what I learned during and after the war." She crossed to the sewing room and returned with her medical bag. Nathaniel watched warily as she set it on the table and opened it. Inside neatly organized compartments held dozens of small bottles, packages of herbs, and medical instruments. "This tincture," she said, selecting a dark glass bottle, "contains willow bark for pain fever, few to ease tension, and lavender for its calming properties. 2 drops in water at the first sign of a headache can prevent it from worsening." Nathaniel made no move to take the bottle. "Why would you help me, after what my daughter's deception has cost you?" Abigail met his gaze steadily. "Because you're in pain, and alleviating suffering is what I was trained to do. Nothing more complicated than that." After a long moment, he accepted the bottle, turning it in his hands. "Thank you." She nodded, returning the medical bag to her room. When she re-emerged, Nathaniel had moved to sit in one of the rocking chairs before the fire, his posture suggesting bone-deep weariness. "You should get some rest," he said without looking at her. "The storm will likely pass by morning, but the trails won't be clear for days yet." "Catherine mentioned you're a carpenter," Abigail said, ignoring the dismissal. "Your work is beautiful." He glanced up, surprise once again crossing his features. "You can tell craftsmanship from wood. My father was a cabinet maker in Boston. Not as skilled as you, I think, but he taught me to appreciate well-made things." Something shifted in Nathaniel's expression, not quite warmth, but a lessening of guardedness. "I'm sorry about Catherine's deception. It wasn't fair to you." "Children do what they must to survive grief," Abigail replied softly. "I don't blame her. Still, you've come a long way for nothing." "Not nothing, Mr. Thorne. I'm alive, which seemed unlikely during that blizzard. And I've met your remarkable daughter." She paused, then added, "When the weather permits, I'll find my way. I always have." Nathaniel studied her for a long moment, as if truly seeing her for the first time. "Good night, Miss Porter." Good night, Mr. Thorne. Returning to the sewing room, Abigail left the curtain partially open, wanting to hear if Catherine called out again. She wound the music box one last time, letting the familiar melody wash over her before slipping beneath the blankets. Outside, the storm continued to abate, its fury spent. Inside, something had shifted subtly, like the first hint of a thaw after the deepest freeze of winter. Abigail woke to sunlight streaming through the small window and the delicious smell of frying bacon. For a moment, she lay still, orienting herself to her surroundings. The events of the previous day returned in a rush. Catherine's confession, Nathaniel's cold reception, the night terror. She dressed quickly in one of her simpler dresses, grateful that her trunk contained clothing suitable for practical work. After smoothing her hair into a simple knot at the nape of her neck, she ventured into the main room. Catherine stood at the stove, carefully turning bacon in a cast-iron skillet. She wore a clean dress with a small apron, her hair neatly braided. Her face lit up when she saw Abigail. "Good morning, I'm making breakfast." "So I see," Abigail replied, smiling. "It smells wonderful." "Papa had to go check on the horses. He said the snow's almost up to the barn door." Catherine transferred the bacon to a plate already holding biscuits. "We have coffee or tea? Which do you like better?" "Tea, please." While Catherine poured hot water into a mug, Abigail glanced around the room. In daylight, she noticed details missed the previous evening: a small bookshelf filled with children's books, a pair of woman's knitting needles stuck in a basket of yarn, a faded daguerreotype on the mantel, showing a smiling, dark-haired woman. Hannah Thorne, she presumed, Catherine's mother, Nathaniel's wife. Her gaze fell next on a small desk in the corner where papers were stacked neatly beside an inkwell. One document lay open, the handwriting matching that of the letter that had brought her to Wyoming. Catherine had done a remarkable job of copying her father's script. The front door opened, letting in a blast of cold air along with Nathaniel. He stamped snow from his boots, his breath visible in the chill. When he saw Abigail standing by the fire, he nodded in greeting. "Miss Porter, I trust you slept well after Catherine's excitement." "Yes, thank you. She's been kind enough to prepare breakfast." "Has she?" He hung his coat on a peg by the door, then moved to inspect his daughter's work. "Well done, Katie, though I see you've used all our bacon." "It's company breakfast," Catherine explained seriously. "Miss Eliza says you always give guests the best you have." A small smile touched Nathaniel's lips. "Miss Eliza is usually right about such things." He turned to Abigail. "I've checked the trail to town. It's passable, though difficult. Thomas will likely come to check on us today or tomorrow." The message was clear. Her stay had a defined endpoint. Breakfast passed pleasantly enough, with Catherine carrying most of the conversation. She told Abigail about her lessons, her favorite books, and the pine marten that sometimes visited the woodpile. "And in summer, we grow peas and carrots and potatoes," she continued between bites of biscuit. "But the deer eat half of everything, unless Papa stays up all night with his rifle." "Sounds challenging," Abigail said, noting how Nathaniel watched his daughter with quiet pride despite his reserved demeanor. "Papa says anything worth having requires effort," Catherine recited clearly, quoting a familiar maxim. "Like my arithmetic." After breakfast, Nathaniel announced he needed to clear more snow from around the barn and workshop. "Catherine, show Miss Porter where the dishes go, then start your reading lesson. I'll check your progress when I return." When he had gone, Catherine helped Abigail wash and dry the breakfast dishes. The girl moved with practiced efficiency, clearly accustomed to household tasks beyond her years. "Do you do all the cooking?" Abigail asked. Catherine shook her head. "Papa does most of it, but I help, and I can make biscuits by myself now." That's impressive for someone your age. The girl beamed at the praise. After Mama died, I had to learn lots of things. Papa was sad for a long time. He didn't even go to his workshop. Abigail's heart ached for the child who had shouldered such responsibility so young. It's very hard to lose someone you love. Did you lose someone? Catherine asked, her perception startling. Yes, my sister Emily. She died last year. Were you very sad? I still am sometimes, but it gets easier with time. Catherine nodded solemnly. That's what Miss Eliza says too, but Papa still gets sad, even though it's been a long time. While Catherine settled at the table with her reading book, Abigail moved to the window, gazing out at the transformed landscape. The storm had left behind a world of pristine white, sculpted by wind into fantastic shapes. The sky above was a clear, piercing blue. In the yard, Nathaniel worked steadily, clearing paths to the outbuildings. The physical labor seemed to come easily to him, his movements fluid and efficient. Despite her situation, Abigail found herself admiring his quiet strength. Turning from the window, she noticed a small cabinet beside the fireplace, its doors slightly ajar. Inside, she glimpsed bottles and jars, a medicine cabinet most likely. Without thinking, she opened it fully to examine the contents. Most were standard remedies available from any general store: cod liver oil, Dr. Bateman's pectoral drops, Perry Davis, painkiller. But her attention was caught by several handwritten labels in a feminine script. For cough, for fever, for sleep. Hannah's remedies, she realized. Homemade treatments prepared by a mother concerned for her family's health. One bottle was nearly empty, its label reading for lungs. Abigail carefully removed the stopper and sniffed the contents. Horehound honey and something else she couldn't identify. A standard remedy for respiratory ailments, but likely insufficient for tuberculosis or severe pneumonia. Those were Mama's medicines, Catherine said from directly behind her, making Abigail start. The doctor gave her lots of bottles, but nothing helped. Abigail carefully replaced the bottle. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have pried. It's all right. Catherine peered into the cabinet. Papa keeps them because they were Mama's, but we don't use them anymore. Before Abigail could respond, the front door opened again. Nathaniel entered, bringing with him the sharp scent of cold and pine. His gaze immediately fell on the open cabinet and Abigail standing beside it. I see you've found Hannah's remedies, he said, his tone neutral, but a certain tension entering his frame. I apologize for the intrusion, Abigail said quickly. Professional curiosity got the better of me. He crossed to the cabinet and closed it gently. No need to apologize. They're just memories now. He turned to Catherine. How is your reading coming along? As the girl showed her father her progress, Abigail retreated to the window seat, feeling she had inadvertently crossed a boundary. The contents of that cabinet represented more than just medicines. They were tangible remnants of the woman whose absence still echoed through this home. Throughout the day, Abigail tried to make herself useful without intruding. She offered to help with lunch preparation, assisted Catherine with hemming a handkerchief, and discreetly tidied the sewing room where she slept. In the afternoon, while Catherine napped and Nathaniel worked in his snow-cleared workshop, Abigail found herself drawn to the small desk in the corner. The documents there, bills of sale, supply lists, and correspondence, offered glimpses into the practical realities of frontier life. One folder labeled Medical contained something unexpected: detailed instructions from a doctor in Cheyenne regarding the care of a patient with advanced pulmonary consumption tuberculosis. The sheets were worn at the edges as if handled repeatedly. Notes in Nathaniel's handwriting covered the margins: times of medication, temperature readings, observations of symptoms. A record of Hannah's final illness documented with painstaking precision. Abigail's throat tightened. These weren't just clinical notes. They were a husband's desperate efforts to save his wife, recording every detail in case it might make a difference. As a nurse who had treated countless tuberculosis patients during and after the war, she recognized the progression, the increasing frequency of hemoptysis, coughing blood, the fever patterns, the relentless weight loss. The final entry, dated 3 years prior, contained a single line: Hannah Thorne, beloved wife, and mother, departed this life at 4:17 a.m. Abigail carefully returned the folder to its place, a new understanding dawning. Nathaniel's reserve wasn't merely the natural caution of a frontier man toward a stranger. It was the protective shell of someone who had watched helpless as his wife suffered a slow, agonizing death. A death that with her medical training Abigail might have eased, if not prevented. No wonder Catherine had been so determined to bring a nurse into their home. The sudden sound of boots on the porch alerted her to Nathaniel's return. She moved quickly away from the desk, taking up a position by the fire, just as the door opened. He entered carrying an armload of wood, which he deposited in the box beside the fireplace. Snow dusted his shoulders and hair, melting quickly in the room's warmth. Thomas Wheeler rode by the edge of the property, he said without preamble. The trail to town is clearing, but he doesn't advise travel yet. Another day, perhaps. I understand, Abigail replied. Then, before she could reconsider, Mr. Thorne, I saw the medical records on your desk. I want to say how sorry I am about your wife's illness. Nathaniel stiffened, his face closing like a door shut against a storm. Those were private. I know. I apologize for the intrusion. But as a nurse who treated many such cases during the war, Miss Porter, he interrupted, his voice low but intense. I appreciate your professional interest, but my wife's illness is not a subject for discussion, especially not with someone who will be leaving as soon as the trail's clear. The rebuke stung, but Abigail understood the pain behind it. Of course. I meant no offense. A tense silence fell, broken only by the crackle of the fire. Finally Nathaniel sighed, running a hand through his hair. Forgive my sharpness. Hannah's illness, it's still difficult to discuss. No forgiveness necessary. I overstepped. He studied her for a moment, then nodded once before turning toward Catherine's room. I should wake her from her nap, or she'll be up all night. Left alone, Abigail returned to the window seat, watching as the short winter day faded toward dusk. Beyond the cleared yard, the wilderness stretched vast and indifferent, beautiful in its harshness. Somewhere out there lay her future, uncertain, uncharted, but inevitably separate from this place and its inhabitants. The thought brought an unexpected pang of regret. That evening, after Catherine had been put to bed, Abigail found herself alone with Nathaniel in the main room. He sat at his desk reviewing what appeared to be orders for his carpentry work. She occupied herself with mending a tear in one of her traveling dresses, the only sound the scratch of his pen and the soft pop of the fire. You mentioned your father was a cabinet maker, he said suddenly, breaking the silence. Surprised, Abigail looked up from her sewing. Yes, he had a small shop in Boston. Did you learn the trade? No, though I spent many hours in his workshop as a child. I was more drawn to my mother's interests. She was something of an herbalist and healer. It led naturally to nursing. Nathaniel set down his pen, turning slightly to face her. During the war, yes, I was 18 when the fighting started. My mother had died the year before, and my father allowed me to volunteer with the Sanitary Commission. Later, I worked in field hospitals closer to the front. That must have been difficult for one so young. Abigail's hands stilled on her mending. It was, but also purposeful. I knew I was making a difference even in the midst of such suffering. Nathaniel nodded, his expression thoughtful. Purpose sustains us when nothing else can. Yes, exactly. She hesitated, then added, after the war, I continued nursing at Massachusetts General Hospital. It became my life's work. When the hospital reduced staff last autumn, it felt like losing part of myself. And then my daughter's letter arrived. Yes, it seemed providential somehow, a new purpose when I most needed one. Nathaniel's gaze dropped to his hands. I'm sorry for the deception, Miss Porter, and for the position you now find yourself in. Life rarely follows the paths we plan, Abigail said softly. We adapt as best we can. He looked up then, meeting her eyes directly for perhaps the first time since her arrival. Yes, we do. In that moment of shared understanding, something shifted between them, not friendship precisely, but a mutual recognition of resilience in the face of life's unexpected turns. The moment passed as quickly as it had come. Nathaniel returned to his papers and Abigail to her mending. But the silence that followed felt different, more comfortable, less strained. Later, as Abigail prepared for bed in the small sewing room, she found herself listening for sounds from the main house. Catherine's peaceful breathing from the bedroom, Nathaniel banking the fire for the night. Simple domestic sounds that she had not realized she missed until now. She wound her music box one last time, letting Shenandoah fill the small room as she slipped beneath the blankets. Tomorrow, perhaps the trail to town would clear. Tomorrow, she would begin plotting her future anew. But tonight, in this unexpected shelter, she allowed herself a moment of peace. Outside, beneath stars sharp as glass in the frozen sky, a lone wolf howled, a sound both beautiful and haunting in its wild solitude. Dawn broke over the Thorne homestead with a crystalline clarity that transformed the landscape into a painter's dream. Frost etched delicate patterns on the windows, and the snow-covered world outside sparkled with diamond brilliance in the early light. Abigail woke to these wonders, momentarily disoriented by the profound silence. In Boston, mornings had meant clattering carriages, vendors' calls, the constant hum of humanity. Here, the stillness felt almost sacred. She dressed quickly, the chill air motivating efficiency, and made her way to the main room. To her surprise, both Nathaniel and Catherine were already gone, though the fire had been built up and the coffee pot sat warming on the stove. A note in Nathaniel's precise handwriting lay on the table. Gone to check trap lines. Catherine helping. Back mid-morning. Alone in the house, Abigail took the opportunity to truly observe her surroundings. The homestead spoke volumes about its inhabitants, Nathaniel's craftsmanship evident in every piece of furniture, Catherine's childish drawings carefully pinned to one wall, and Hannah's presence lingering in small touches, like embroidered cushions, and carefully preserved dried flowers in a vase on the mantel. In daylight, Abigail noticed a narrow staircase leading to what must be an attic space. Curiosity pulled her upward. The small attic proved to be Nathaniel's bedroom, Spartan, but neat, with a handmade quilt on the bed, and a small table holding a Bible and a daguerreotype of Hannah. A carpenter's sketchbook lay open, showing designs for what appeared to be a child-sized desk. Feeling like an intruder, Abigail quickly retreated downstairs. She busied herself tidying the already neat kitchen and preparing a simple stew for lunch using dried vegetables and salted meat she found in the pantry. The familiar tasks centered her, providing purpose. Mid-morning brought the sound of voices and boots stomping snow from the porch. The door opened to admit Catherine, her cheeks flushed with cold and excitement, followed by Nathaniel carrying several rabbit carcasses. "Miss Porter," Catherine exclaimed, "we got 6 rabbits, and Papa let me check 2 traps myself." "That's wonderful," Abigail replied, smiling at the girl's enthusiasm. I've started a stew for lunch, which would go nicely with fresh rabbit for supper. Nathaniel looked at the pot simmering on the stove, then at Abigail, surprise evident in his expression. You didn't need to cook for us. I wanted to make myself useful, she replied simply. It's the least I can do for your hospitality. A flicker of something, perhaps appreciation, crossed his face before he nodded. Thank you. I'll clean these outside. While Nathaniel dressed the rabbits at a work table behind the house, Catherine helped Abigail set the table for lunch. The girl chattered happily about their morning expedition, describing animal tracks they'd seen and how her father had taught her to identify them. Papa says if you know how to read the snow, it's like a storybook about all the animals, she explained. Even when you can't see them, you know they're there. Your father is very wise, Abigail said. That's an important lesson. Sometimes the most significant things are those we can't see directly. Catherine considered this with solemn intensity. Like Mama watching over us? The question caught Abigail off guard. Do you feel that she watches over you? The girl nodded. Papa says she's with the angels. But sometimes I feel her here, especially when the wind blows through the pine trees. It sounds like she's humming. Abigail's throat tightened with emotion. That's a beautiful thought, Catherine. When Nathaniel returned with the dressed rabbits, the three sat down to lunch. Catherine's morning adventures had given her a hearty appetite, and she ate with enthusiasm while continuing to share stories of their expedition. Nathaniel remained quiet but attentive, occasionally correcting details or adding context to his daughter's tales. The trail to town appears clear, he mentioned during a lull in conversation. Thomas will likely come by today or tomorrow. Abigail nodded, feeling a strange reluctance at the prospect of leaving. I'll be ready when he arrives. Where will you go? Catherine asked, her fork pausing halfway to her mouth. Will you go back to Boston? I don't know yet, Abigail admitted. My home there has been sold. Perhaps Cheyenne or even Denver. I hear they have need of experienced nurses. But that's so far away. The distress in Catherine's voice was palpable. Catherine, Nathaniel said gently, Miss Porter must make her own way. Remember what we discussed. The girl's shoulders slumped. Yes, Papa. After lunch, Nathaniel announced he needed to work in his shop to complete an order for the general store. Catherine, you have arithmetic to finish, he reminded her. Can Miss Porter help me instead of you? Catherine asked hopefully. She said she knows multiplication. Nathaniel hesitated, looking to Abigail. If Miss Porter doesn't mind, I'd be happy to, Abigail assured him. Once Nathaniel had gone to his workshop, Catherine fetched her slate and arithmetic book. They settled at the table where Abigail discovered the girl was indeed quite advanced for her age. Your father must be an excellent teacher, she observed as Catherine worked through problems with surprising skill. He says numbers make sense even when nothing else does, Catherine replied carefully, writing out an equation. After Mama died, he taught me every night, even when he was very tired. As the afternoon progressed, Abigail found herself increasingly impressed by Catherine's intelligence and determination. The girl approached each problem methodically, rarely making careless errors, and quickly grasping new concepts. When they finished the assigned work, Catherine showed Abigail her small bookshelf, proudly displaying favorites like Robinson Crusoe and Swiss Family Robinson. Papa reads to me every night, she explained, and I can read most of them myself now, except for the biggest words. You're quite accomplished for your age, Abigail told her sincerely. Catherine beamed at the praise. Mama taught me my letters before she got sick. She said, education is the best gift a parent can give a child. The mention of Hannah led Catherine to retrieve a small album from a drawer. Inside were carefully preserved photographs and sketches, Hannah holding infant Catherine, Hannah and Nathaniel standing before their newly built home, Hannah sitting at a spinning wheel, her dark hair cascading over one shoulder. "She was beautiful," Abigail said softly. "Papa says I have her eyes," Catherine replied, touching a photograph gently. "Do you think so?" Abigail studied the images, noting the resemblance between mother and daughter, the same almond-shaped eyes, the same determined set to the chin. "Yes, I do see that. You have her smile as well." As she turned another page, Abigail froze. The woman in this photograph, standing beside a much younger Nathaniel, bore a striking resemblance to Emily. The same heart-shaped face, the same gentle eyes. For a disorienting moment, it was as if her sister had somehow found her way into this family album. "Miss Porter," Catherine's voice broke through her shocked reverie. "Are you all right?" "Yes, I'm fine." Abigail managed, turning the page quickly. "Your mother's album is a wonderful treasure." They continued through the book with Catherine providing commentary on each image. By the time they reached the final page, Abigail had composed herself, though the strange resemblance between Hannah and Emily lingered in her mind like an echo. Later, as the early winter dusk settled over the homestead, Nathaniel returned from his workshop carrying a small wooden object wrapped in a cloth. He seemed surprised to find Catherine and Abigail still at the table, surrounded by books and papers. "You've been at your studies all afternoon," he asked his daughter. "Miss Porter knows all about fractions," Catherine exclaimed, "and she showed me how to divide big numbers the easy way." Nathaniel's gaze shifted to Abigail, a new respect evident. "You have a gift for teaching." "Catherine makes it easy," Abigail replied. "She's remarkably quick to understand new concepts." A hint of pride softened his features. "She takes after her mother in that." He set the cloth-wrapped object on the table. "I've brought something that needs repair." Catherine pulled back the cloth to reveal Abigail's music box. "You fixed it." "Not yet," Nathaniel corrected. "The mechanism is stuck. I thought Miss Porter might want it working properly for her journey." Abigail was touched by the gesture. "That's very thoughtful of you, Mr. Thorne." He nodded, some of his usual reserve returning. "I'll see to it tomorrow. For now, we should prepare supper." The evening passed pleasantly, with Abigail helping Nathaniel prepare the rabbit stew, while Catherine set the table and fetched preserved vegetables from the root cellar. The domesticity of these shared tasks created a sense of harmony that surprised Abigail. For a few hours, it was possible to imagine that this was her life, this home, this child, this quiet man with his careful ways. After Catherine had been tucked into bed, Nathaniel and Abigail sat before the fire, each occupied with their own tasks, he whittling what appeared to be a small animal figure, she mending a torn sleeve. "Thomas Wheeler's wife, Martha, mentioned you might find work in Cheyenne," Nathaniel said after a companionable silence. "The hospital there is expanding." "That's good to know," Abigail replied. "I hadn't considered Cheyenne specifically. It's a growing city, rough in parts but respectable enough for a woman of your standing." He focused on his carving thin curls of wood falling to the floor. "You would be safe there." Abigail recognized the concern behind his words. "Thank you. I've learned to be cautious, especially traveling alone." Nathaniel nodded, still not looking up. "The West can be harsh for those unprepared, but you've already survived one blizzard, thanks to Thomas Wheeler's timely arrival. And your own resilience before that." Now he did look at her, his gaze direct. Not many would have survived a night alone in such conditions. The quiet admiration in his voice warmed her more than the fire. Necessity is a powerful motivator. Indeed. He returned to his carving, turning the small piece in his skilled hands. Catherine has taken to you. She's a remarkable child. You've done well raising her on your own." A shadow crossed his face. "I've done my best, but a girl needs a mother's guidance in many things." "She speaks of Hannah often," Abigail ventured carefully. "It's clear her memory remains vivid in your home." Nathaniel's hands stilled. "I've tried to keep Hannah present for Catherine's sake. Sometimes I wonder if that was wise, keeping grief so close." "Remembrance isn't the same as grief," Abigail said gently. "Catherine needs to know who her mother was to carry that part of herself forward." He considered her words, then nodded slowly. "Perhaps you're right." After a moment, he added, "I saw you looking at Hannah's album today." Abigail tensed slightly, wondering if he would mention the resemblance she'd noticed. "Catherine showed it to me. It's a beautiful record of your family." Hannah believed in preserving moments. She said time moved too quickly not to catch pieces of it when you could. His voice softened with memory. She would have wanted Catherine to have those images. The conversation lapsed into silence again, but the quality had changed deeper, more reflective. Outside, snow began to fall once more, large flakes drifting lazily past the window. "Another storm?" Abigail asked, glancing toward the darkness beyond the glass. "Just a light snow. Nothing like what you arrived in." Nathaniel set aside his carving, a small rabbit perfectly proportioned despite its size. "Catherine will be pleased. She's been hoping for more snow for her fort." "Her fort?" "She builds snow structures behind the house, quite elaborate ones with tunnels and chambers. Her own little world." The image of Catherine creating miniature ice palaces brought a smile to Abigail's face. "Children have such wonderful imaginations." "Yes," Nathaniel agreed, his expression softening further, "though sometimes it leads to unexpected consequences, such as writing to bride agencies." Abigail couldn't help but laugh softly. "Indeed." For the first time since her arrival, Nathaniel smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his features from merely handsome to something that caught her breath. In that moment, Abigail glimpsed the man he might have been before loss had carved its deep channels through his life. The smile faded quickly, but something of its warmth remained in his eyes. "Good night, Miss Porter." "Good night, Mr. Thorne." As she retired to the sewing room, Abigail found herself thinking of Hannah's photographs, of Catherine's eager mind, of Nathaniel's rare smile. This family, broken by loss, yet still functioning, still loving, had affected her more deeply than she cared to admit. Tomorrow, perhaps, Thomas Wheeler would arrive to escort her back to town. Tomorrow, she would begin the process of rebuilding her life yet again. But tonight, she would cherish this unexpected interlude of belonging. The snow continued to fall, a gentle benediction upon the sleeping homestead. Morning brought no sign of Thomas Wheeler, but a letter delivered by a neighbor's son confirmed he would come the following day. The storm had worsened overnight, leaving another 6 inches of fresh snow across the landscape. Catherine was delighted. "Now my fort can have a second story," she declared over breakfast. "Miss Porter, will you help me build it?" Before Abigail could respond, Nathaniel interjected gently. "Miss Porter may prefer to prepare for her departure tomorrow, Katie." "But that won't take all day," Catherine argued. "Please, Miss Porter, just for a little while." Unable to resist the girl's pleading eyes, Abigail agreed, "For a little while, though I warn you I have limited experience with snow architecture." After breakfast, Nathaniel retreated to his workshop to continue work on an order of chairs for the church in Red Pine. Catherine led Abigail outside, properly bundled in borrowed gloves and a woolen scarf. The fort proved to be an impressive structure for one built by a child. A circular wall of packed snow with an entrance tunnel and the beginnings of interior chambers. Catherine directed operations with surprising authority, assigning Abigail the task of packing snow into rectangular blocks, while she determined their placement. "Papa helped me start it last week," she explained carefully, positioning a snow brick. "But he says imagination is more important than following plans exactly." "Your father is wise," Abigail said, forming another block. "Though in medicine we tend to follow procedures quite strictly." Catherine considered this, her breath visible in the cold air. "But don't you sometimes have to try new things if the old ones don't work?" "Yes, that's true. The best doctors and nurses combine careful procedure with creative thinking when necessary. Like Papa with his woodworking. He says sometimes the wood tells him what it wants to be, and it's different from what he planned." Abigail smiled at the child's insight. "Exactly like that." They worked together for over an hour, the fort growing more elaborate under Catherine's direction. By the time they finished, it boasted multiple chambers, a watchtower, and even primitive furnishings sculpted from snow. "It's magnificent," Abigail declared, surveying their handiwork. "A palace fit for an ice princess." "That's you," Catherine said, grabbing her hand. "You can be the ice queen, and I'll be the princess, and we'll have adventures together." The simplicity of the child's joy was infectious. Abigail found herself drawn into Catherine's imaginary world, play-acting royal proclamations and defending the fort from invisible invaders. When was the last time she had engaged in such pure, uncomplicated play? Not since Emily had fallen ill, certainly. Perhaps not since childhood itself. They were so engrossed in their game that neither noticed Nathaniel watching from the workshop doorway, his expression a complex mixture of pleasure and pain. Finally, cold and exhaustion drove them inside. While Abigail helped Catherine out of her snow-crusted outer garments, Nathaniel built up the fire and set water to boil for hot chocolate. "A rare treat," Catherine informed her in an excited whisper. "Your fort has grown considerably," Nathaniel observed as they gathered at the table with steaming mugs. "I particularly admired the watchtower." "That was Miss Porter's idea," Catherine said proudly. "She said every proper castle needs a place to see enemies coming." Did she now? Nathaniel's gaze met Abigail's over his mug, a hint of amusement warming his blue eyes. "Practical as well as educational, it seems." Abigail felt her cheeks warm, and not from the hot chocolate. "My brother and I built snow forts as children. The watchtower was always our favorite feature." "And you have a brother?" Catherine asked. "Where is he now?" A familiar pang accompanied the question. "He died at Gettysburg during the war." Sympathy filled Catherine's expressive face. "Like Papa's brother, the one who never came home." Nathaniel set down his mug with deliberate care. "Catherine, that's enough questions for now. Why don't you fetch your slate? We'll work on your lessons while Miss Porter rests." The girl obeyed, though reluctantly. When she had gone to retrieve her school materials, Nathaniel turned to Abigail. "I apologize. Catherine sometimes speaks without thinking." "There's no need," Abigail assured him. "Children are naturally curious, and death is a concept they struggle to understand fully." Still, he hesitated, then added, "I'm sorry about your brother." "Thank you. It was a long time ago now." She wrapped her hands around her mug, drawing comfort from its warmth. "Catherine mentioned you lost a brother as well." Something closed in Nathaniel's expression. "Yes, James. He joined the Union Army in '63. We never learned exactly how or where he fell." The pain in his voice resonated with Abigail's own memories of that terrible time, the endless waiting for news, the desperate hope that proved crueler than certainty in the end. "I'm sorry," she said simply. Nathaniel nodded once in acknowledgement, then rose as Catherine returned with her slate. "We'll work by the fire. You're welcome to rest in your room if you wish." Abigail recognized the gentle dismissal. Whatever openness had briefly existed between them had closed again, shuttered by the mention of his brother. She retreated to the sewing room, where she began the practical task of organizing her belongings for tomorrow's departure. As she folded dresses and arranged medical supplies, Abigail found her thoughts returning to Catherine's innocent question. Something about it nagged at her, a connection just beyond her grasp. James Thorne, Nathaniel's brother, lost in the war. Her own brother Edward fallen at Gettysburg. Two families fractured by the same conflict, their paths somehow converging in this remote Wyoming homestead. And Hannah's strange resemblance to Emily in that photograph. Abigail shook her head, dismissing the fanciful direction of her thoughts. Coincidences existed. Not everything carried deeper meaning, despite humanity's endless search for patterns in chaos. That evening, after a simple supper of leftovers, Nathaniel surprised both Abigail and Catherine by producing the music box, now fully repaired. "I fixed the mechanism this afternoon," he explained, handing it to Abigail. One of the gears had slipped out of alignment. "Thank you," she said, genuinely touched by the gesture. "This means a great deal to me." "Can we hear it?" Catherine asked eagerly. Abigail wound the small key and opened the lid. The familiar notes of Shenandoah filled the room, clear and perfect. Catherine closed her eyes, swaying slightly to the melody. Even Nathaniel seemed affected, his gaze distant, as if seeing something or someone no longer present. When the song ended, Catherine clapped her hands. "It's beautiful. Play it again, please." Abigail complied, winding the key once more. This time, to her surprise, Catherine began to sing along, her childish voice, adding lyrics to the instrumental melody. "O Shenandoah, I long to hear you, away, you rolling river. O Shenandoah, I long to hear you, away I'm bound away across the wide Missouri." The simple verses, delivered in Catherine's clear, sweet voice, brought unexpected tears to Abigail's eyes. She glanced at Nathaniel and saw his own eyes glistening. "That was lovely, Catherine," she said when the song ended. "Where did you learn the words?" "Mama taught me," the girl replied. She said her grandmother sang it when she left Virginia to go west with her new husband. It was a leaving song, but also a new beginning song. Nathaniel cleared his throat. "Time for bed, Katie. Say good night to Miss Porter." Catherine's face fell. "But she's leaving tomorrow. Can't I stay up longer?" "You'll see her in the morning before she goes." His tone was gentle but firm. With clear reluctance, Catherine bid Abigail good night, lingering for an extra moment in the embrace Abigail offered. After the girl had been tucked into bed, Nathaniel returned to the main room, where Abigail stood by the fire, the music box still in her hands. "She sings beautifully," Abigail said. "She must take after Hannah in that as well." "Yes." Nathaniel moved to the mantel, adjusting a small carved figure, a horse in mid-gallop, exquisitely detailed. "Hannah would sing that song when Catherine was colicky as an infant. It always soothed her." "My father used to sing it to Emily and me," Abigail said softly. "It's strange how the same melody can weave through different lives, connecting them." Nathaniel turned to face her fully. "Miss Porter Abigail, I want to thank you for your patience with Catherine these past days. Her attachment to you has grown quickly, perhaps too quickly, considering your imminent departure." "Children form connections easily," Abigail replied. "And Catherine is especially open-hearted. Still, I'm concerned about how she'll react tomorrow. She's experienced enough loss in her young life." The implication was clear: Abigail's departure would be another wound for Catherine to bear. The thought pierced her with unexpected sharpness. "I understand," she said carefully. Perhaps it would be best if I left early, before she wakes. Nathaniel shook his head. No, that would only compound the hurt. Catherine needs to learn that goodbyes, while painful, are sometimes necessary. Of course. Abigail set the music box on the table, suddenly weary. Mr. Thorne, I want you to know how grateful I am for your hospitality, despite the unusual circumstances of my arrival. You've been a guest any host would value, he replied formally. Then, with less reserve, Catherine was right about one thing you know. You would have made an excellent wife and mother here. The simple statement delivered without artifice or intent caught Abigail unprepared. For a brief, vertiginous moment, she glimpsed an alternate life, this home, this family, this quiet man with his hidden depths becoming hers to know fully. "Thank you," she managed, fighting to maintain her composure. "That means a great deal coming from you." Nathaniel held her gaze for a long moment, something unspoken passing between them. Then he nodded once, the gesture somehow conveying both acknowledgement and farewell. "Good night, Abigail." "Good night, Nathaniel." It was the first time they had used each other's given names. As Abigail retired to the sewing room for her final night at the Thorne homestead, she felt the significance of that small intimacy, a bridge briefly crossed, even as circumstances required them to turn back. Outside, the last of the day's gentle snowfall had ceased. Stars emerged in the clear night sky, their cold brilliance illuminating the transformed landscape. In the morning, Thomas Wheeler would arrive to escort her back to Red Pine, and from there, her journey would continue to places unknown. But tonight, for these last few hours, she belonged here in this unlikely sanctuary that had welcomed her despite everything. Morning arrived with painful brightness, sunlight reflecting off the pristine snow with almost blinding intensity. Abigail woke early, completing her packing with efficient movements born of long practice. By the time she emerged into the main room, Nathaniel was already up, building the fire and brewing coffee. "Good morning," he greeted her, his tone carefully neutral. "Thomas sent word he'll arrive after breakfast. There's fresh snow, but the trail is clear." "Thank you." Abigail set her packed medical bag near the door. "Is Catherine still asleep?" "Yes, I thought it best to let her rest as long as possible." He poured a cup of coffee and offered it to her. "She was restless last night." Abigail accepted the cup, their fingers brushing momentarily in the exchange. Children sense change, even in sleep. They shared a quiet breakfast of cornbread, and preserves the silence between them, not uncomfortable but weighted with unspoken thoughts. As Nathaniel cleared the dishes, the sound of small feet padding across the floor announced Catherine's arrival. The girl appeared in her nightgown, hair tousled from sleep eyes, immediately finding Abigail. "You're still here," she said, relief evident in her voice. "I wouldn't leave without saying goodbye," Abigail assured her. "Mr. Wheeler will come after breakfast." Catherine's face fell. "I hoped the snow would be too deep for his sleigh." "Catherine," Nathaniel said gently, "we've discussed this. Miss Porter must continue her journey." "But why can't her journey be here?" The plaintiveness in the child's voice pierced Abigail's heart. Nathaniel knelt before his daughter, hands resting lightly on her shoulders. "Because that's not what was agreed. Now go dress properly, to bid Miss Porter farewell." When Catherine had trudged reluctantly to her room, Nathaniel straightened his expression, apologetic. "She's taking this harder than I anticipated." Children form attachments quickly. Abigail repeated her words from the previous night. "Especially to those who show them kindness." "It's more than that." Nathaniel hesitated, then continued carefully. "Since Hannah died, Catherine has watched me, worried about me in her childish way. I think she believes you could heal more than just physical ailments. The insight stunned Abigail with its perceptiveness and vulnerability. Before she could formulate a response, Catherine returned dressed, but with a mutinous set to her small jaw. "I have something for you," she announced to Abigail, holding out a folded piece of paper. "It's a map to find your way back if you get lost." Abigail accepted the gift, opening it to reveal a child's drawing of the homestead, complete with labeled buildings and a winding path leading from a cluster of squares marked Town. Hearts and stars decorated the margins. "This is wonderful," she said sincerely. "I'll keep it with me always." "Promise?" Catherine's eyes, so like her father's, searched Abigail's face. "I promise." Impulsively, Abigail reached for her medical bag and withdrew a small carved box containing willow bark for pain relief. She emptied the contents into a paper envelope and handed the box to Catherine. "And this is for you to remember me by." The girl clutched the small box to her chest. "I won't forget you. Not ever." The sound of sleigh bells outside prevented further conversation. Nathaniel moved to the window, confirming Thomas Wheeler's arrival. "It's time, Katie." The farewell on the porch was brief but emotional. Catherine clung to Abigail with surprising strength, finally releasing her only at Nathaniel's gentle insistence. He helped Abigail into the sleigh, arranging buffalo robes around her for warmth. "Thank you for everything," she said, looking up at him from beneath the sleigh's canopy. "Safe journey, Miss Porter." His formal tone had returned, but his eyes conveyed something warmer. "You will be remembered here." Thomas Wheeler clicked to his horse, and the sleigh pulled away, cutting fresh tracks in the new snow. Abigail looked back once to see Catherine waving vigorously, Nathaniel standing tall beside her, his hand raised in a more restrained farewell. The homestead diminished with distance, finally disappearing around a bend in the trail. Abigail faced forward, blinking away unexpected tears. "Parting's never easy," Thomas observed kindly. "Especially from that little one. She's got a way of working into a person's heart." "Yes," Abigail agreed softly. "She does." The journey to town passed largely in silence. Thomas respected her pensive mood, commenting only occasionally on landmarks or changes in the terrain. As they approached Red Pine, he finally broached the subject of her plans. "Martha's been asking after you," he said. "Wonders if you've decided where you're headed next." "I haven't," Abigail admitted. "Perhaps Cheyenne, as Mr. Thorne suggested. I understand they have need of experienced nurses." "That they do." Thomas guided his horse around a drift. "Though, if you don't mind me saying so, you seemed right at home out at Thorne's place." Abigail tensed slightly. "That was a temporary arrangement, due to circumstances beyond anyone's control." Of course," Thomas nodded sagely. "Just an observation from an old man who's seen a fair bit of life. Sometimes the best arrangements start by accident." Before Abigail could respond, Red Pine came into view, a collection of snow-topped buildings nestled in a valley, smoke rising from chimneys into the clear blue sky. The small settlement looked almost toy-like against the vast wilderness surrounding it. "We'll get you settled at our place until you decide your next move," Thomas said as they approached the town limits. "Martha's already prepared the spare room." "You're very kind," Abigail replied. "I can't thank you enough for all your help." "Nonsense. Looking after each other is how we survive out here." He drew the sleigh to a halt outside his combined home and blacksmith shop. "Besides, it's not often we get a genuine war nurse in our midst. I expect half the town's womenfolk will be seeking your advice before the week is out." Martha Wheeler emerged from the house, her round face creased with a welcoming smile. "There you are. Come inside, child." You must be half frozen." The Wheelers' home, situated above the blacksmith shop, was small but cozy. The main room served as kitchen, dining room, and parlor, with a narrow hallway leading to 2 bedrooms. Everything spoke of comfort, and long-use, worn but clean furnishings, handmade quilts, a collection of daguerreotypes on one wall, showing the couple throughout their decades together. Martha bustled about preparing tea and setting out fresh bread while Thomas brought in Abigail's trunk. "You'll stay as long as you need," Martha insisted. "It does these old bones good to have young company." I don't want to impose," Abigail began, but Martha waved away her concerns. Impose, as if having another woman to talk to in the dead of winter could be an imposition. "Now sit and tell me everything about your stay with the Thorns. Catherine is well, and Nathaniel." Abigail found herself recounting the events of the past days, carefully editing certain aspects, her growing attachment to Catherine, the moments of connection with Nathaniel. Martha listened attentively, occasionally exchanging glances with Thomas that suggested deeper communication between the long-married couple. "That child," Martha said when Abigail described Catherine's deception with the letter. "Bold as brass, just like her mother. Hannah never did anything by halves, and neither does Catherine." "You knew Hannah well?" Abigail asked. "As well as anyone in Red Pine. She came out here as a school teacher in '72, met Nathaniel at a town social, and that was that. Married within 2 months." Martha sighed. "She was a force of nature, Hannah was. When the consumption took her, it was like the light went out in Nathaniel." "He seems devoted to Catherine," Abigail observed. "Oh, he is. That child is his world now." Martha poured more tea. "But a man needs more than just fatherhood to make a life whole." Thomas cleared his throat meaningfully, and Martha fell silent, though her expression remained pointed. After a moment, she changed the subject to more practical matters. "The stage to Cheyenne runs every Tuesday, weather permitting. That gives you 5 days to rest and consider your options. In the meantime, I've already had word from Eliza Montgomery that her youngest has a nasty cough. She'd value your opinion if you're willing." Abigail recognized the offer for what it was, a chance to feel useful, to practice her healing skills again. "Of course. I'd be happy to help." The next few days passed in a blur of activity. Word of Abigail's medical expertise spread quickly through the small community. She found herself visiting various homes, treating everything from winter coughs to a case of frostbite suffered by a trapper who'd stayed too long on his lines. The people of Red Pine were grateful for her skills, offering payment in the form of meals, handcrafted items, or promises of future services. In the evenings, she returned to the Wheelers' home, often sharing supper with various townspeople who stopped by ostensibly to visit Thomas and Martha, but clearly curious about the newcomer in their midst. Abigail found herself warming to these frontier people, direct in speech, generous in spirit, and remarkably resilient in the face of hardship. Yet, despite the welcome and sense of purpose she found in Red Pine, thoughts of the Thorne homestead lingered. Had Catherine's cough improved with the syrup Abigail had left? Was Nathaniel finding time for his woodworking between winter chores? The questions arose unbidden, especially in the quiet hours before sleep. On her 3rd day in town, while organizing her belongings, Abigail discovered her music box had stopped working again. The delicate mechanism seemed more severely damaged than Nathaniel had realized. Disappointed, she set it aside, planning to ask Thomas if he knew of anyone with the skills to repair it properly. That evening, a heavy snowfall kept supper guests away. Abigail found herself alone with the Wheelers, enjoying the comfortable domesticity of their long partnership. After the meal, while Martha mended by the fire, Thomas examined the music box at Abigail's request. "Fine craftsmanship," he observed, turning it in his weathered hands. European, I'd guess, but this is beyond my skills to fix. You need someone with a jeweler's touch. He handed it back. Nathaniel might manage it, though. He has remarkable skill with small mechanisms. I couldn't impose further, Abigail said quickly. Perhaps in Cheyenne. Martha looked up from her mending. You're still planning to leave on Tuesday, then? The question gave Abigail pause. Was she? The stagecoach would come offering passage to Cheyenne and whatever opportunities awaited there. Yet the thought brought no excitement, only a hollow uncertainty. I suppose I am, she said finally. Though I've been welcomed so warmly here in Red Pine. Martha and Thomas exchanged another of their meaningful glances. Then Martha set aside her sewing and leaned forward. Child, may I speak plainly? Without waiting for a response, she continued, You've got the look of someone who's found something worth keeping, but isn't sure she has the right to claim it. Abigail felt heat rise to her cheeks. I don't know what you mean. I think you do. Martha's tone was kind, but direct. I've seen how you talk about Catherine like she's already wormed her way into your heart. And when you mention Nathaniel, there's something in your eyes that speaks volumes. Martha, Thomas cautioned, but his wife pressed on. Life's too short for misplaced pride or fear, especially out here. If there's a chance for happiness, no matter how it came about, only a fool would turn away from it. Abigail struggled to find words. Mr. Thorne has made no indication that he wishes me to stay. Quite the opposite. He was clear about arranging my departure. Nathaniel Thorne is a proud man who's known great loss, Martha replied. He won't risk his heart or his daughter's without certainty, but that doesn't mean he wouldn't welcome the risk being taken for him. Before Abigail could respond to this startling assessment, a knock came at the door. Thomas rose to answer it, admitting a snow-covered figure who proved to be Eliza Montgomery. Forgive the late hour, she said, unwrapping her scarf. But Johnny's cough has worsened, and he's burning with fever now. Could Miss Porter come? Abigail was already reaching for her medical bag. Of course. Let me gather a few supplies. The medical emergency provided a welcome reprieve from Martha's uncomfortable insights. Abigail spent much of the night at the Montgomery home treating young Johnny's respiratory infection with poultices and steam treatments. By dawn, his fever had broken, and his breathing had eased significantly. Exhausted but satisfied, Abigail returned to the Wheelers' home just as Martha was preparing breakfast. The older woman took one look at her and insisted she rest. You've been up all night saving that boy, she said, steering Abigail toward a chair. Eliza sent word an hour ago that he's much improved thanks to you. I'm glad to hear it. Abigail accepted a cup of steaming coffee. He should recover fully with proper care. This town needs someone with your skills, Martha observed, setting a plate of biscuits on the table. Our nearest doctor is in Cheyenne, a journey impossible in winter weather. Abigail smiled tiredly. Are you offering me a position as town physician, Mrs. Wheeler? If I had the authority, I would. Martha sat opposite her. But I suspect your talents might be even more needed elsewhere. Before she could elaborate, Thomas entered with the mail, a rare delivery in winter, brought by a traveler from Cheyenne. Among the letters was one addressed to Abigail. How strange, she said, examining the envelope. No one knows I'm here. The letter bore no return address, only her name in neat childish script that Abigail immediately recognized. She opened it with fingers that trembled slightly. Inside was a simple drawing of three figures holding hands, a man, a woman, and a child standing before a house with smoke curling from its chimney. Beneath the drawing, Catherine had written, Please come home. Papa's headaches are worse, and he misses you too, even if he doesn't say. Abigail stared at the childish plea emotion tightening her throat. Home. Such a simple word, yet so profound in its implications. "What is it, child?" Martha asked, concern in her voice. Wordlessly, Abigail handed her the drawing. Martha studied it, then passed it to Thomas, who had joined them at the table. "Well," he said after a moment, "seems clear enough to me." "It's a child's wishful thinking," Abigail protested, though something deep within her resonated with Catherine's simple request. "Perhaps," Martha agreed. "But children often see truths adults are blind to." Abigail took back the letter, tracing the careful lettering with one finger. "Even if I wanted to explore the possibility Mr. Thorne has made no indication that he shares his daughter's wishes." "Hasn't he?" Thomas asked mildly. "A man who repairs your most precious possession, who speaks of your safety with concern, who, according to you, said you would have made an excellent wife and mother for his family." Put that way, Nathaniel's actions did suggest more than mere hospitality. Yet Abigail hesitated years of self-reliance, making her cautious. "I need time to think," she said finally. "Of course you do." Martha patted her hand. "But don't think too long. The stage leaves Tuesday, and some journeys once begun are difficult to reverse." Abigail spent the day in quiet contemplation, begging off visitors with the excuse of exhaustion from the night's medical work. In the solitude of her borrowed room, she turned the music box over and over in her hands, as if it might yield answers to her unspoken questions. On impulse, she attempted to open the bottom panel, wondering if she might glimpse the damaged mechanism herself. The panel stuck, then gave way, suddenly revealing not just gears, but a small compartment she'd never noticed before. Within it lay a folded piece of paper yellowed with age. Heart quickening, Abigail carefully extracted and unfolded the paper. It proved to be a letter written in a masculine hand she didn't recognize. June 12, 1865. "Dear Miss Porter, as promised, I write to inform you of my brother's sacrifice. The surgeons say I have little time left, so I must be brief. Nathaniel did not desert, as the records state. He took my place when my heart condition would have prevented my service. He believed in the Union cause, but could not bear for our mother to lose both sons. We traded identities. He became James Thorne, and I, Nathaniel Reed, remained behind. The medal they pin on me belongs to him. The honors they speak of are his. I ask that if you survive this terrible war, you find him someday. Tell him I did not waste the life he preserved with his sacrifice. Tell him I am proud to have been his brother. I leave you my most treasured possession, this music box from our childhood. If you find Nathaniel, I pray the melody will help him remember that even in our darkest hours, beauty endures. With eternal gratitude, James Thorne, Nathaniel Reed." Abigail sat frozen, the letter trembling in her hands. Memories cascaded through her mind, Catherine mentioning Papa's brother, who never came home. Nathaniel's pained reaction, his reluctance to discuss James. The coincidences that had nagged at her subconscious suddenly aligned into a pattern too significant to dismiss. James Thorne, the real James Thorne, had been her patient at the field hospital near Appomattox in the war's final days. He had died of heart failure, combined with battle wounds, entrusting her with this music box and the truth of his brother's sacrifice. And by some extraordinary twist of fate, she had found her way to that very brother's doorstep. The realization left her breathless. For 3 years, unknown to herself, she had carried this message meant for Nathaniel. The music box had not been Emily's at all. That had been a convenient fiction she'd created after the war, unable to explain its true provenance to her family without revealing the story of identity exchange that might have branded Nathaniel a deserter. And now, here was the truth, preserved in a hidden compartment all this time. A message from beyond the grave that could either heal old wounds or reopen them. Carefully refolding the letter, Abigail tried to collect her thoughts. What should she do with this knowledge? Return to the homestead immediately. Wait for Nathaniel to come to town. The stage to Cheyenne was only 2 days away, should she board it as planned. Leaving this place and its complications behind, no. That option felt impossible now. Whether or not anything came of her growing feelings for Nathaniel and Catherine, she could not leave without delivering James's final message. She owed that much to the dying soldier who had entrusted her with his legacy. Decision made, Abigail sought out Martha and Thomas, who were preparing for the evening meal. "I need to return to the Thorne homestead," she announced without preamble, "as soon as possible." The Wheelers exchanged glances, but asked no questions. "The trail should be clear by morning," Thomas said. "I'll take you myself." "Thank you." Abigail hesitated, then added, "There's something I should explain." She showed them the letter, watching as understanding dawned on their kind faces. "Well, Thomas breathed when he finished reading. "Nathaniel Reed. I always wondered where he came from with his educated speech and skilled hands, different from most who drift out here." "You understand what this means?" Abigail asked. "He didn't desert the army, he sacrificed his identity to save his brother. And now you've been led right to his door," Martha said softly. "Some might call that providence." Abigail had never been particularly religious, but in that moment she found herself inclined to agree. The series of events that had brought her here, Emily's death, the hospital's closure, Catherine's deception, the blizzard suddenly seemed less like random chance and more like an orchestrated journey. "Will you tell him," Thomas asked, "about the letter?" "I must," Abigail replied. "It's what his brother wanted. After that—" She trailed off, uncertain. "After that," Martha said firmly, "you'll follow your heart whatever direction it leads." That night, Abigail carefully packed her belongings, placing the music box and its precious letter in her medical bag where they would be safe during the journey. As she worked, her mind kept returning to Nathaniel, not as the reserved, grieving widower, but as the young man who had sacrificed his own identity to protect his brother. What kind of man makes such a choice? The same kind, she realized, who would raise his daughter with such care, who would craft beauty from raw wood, who would help a stranger despite his own reservations. A man worth knowing, worth caring for, perhaps even worth loving. The thought both terrified and exhilarated her. For years she had defined herself by her independence, her professional skills, her ability to stand alone. The possibility of linking her life to another's to become part of a family, rather than simply herself, represented a profound shift in how she viewed her future. Yet, as she lay in bed that final night in the Wheelers' home, listening to the wind whisper around the eaves, Abigail found herself not fearful, but strangely at peace. Whatever tomorrow brought, she would face it with the same courage that had carried her through war hospitals, personal loss, and blizzards. Some journeys, once begun, cannot be reversed. But perhaps, she thought, as sleep finally claimed her, this particular journey had been leading her home all along. Dawn broke clear and cold over Red Pine, the rising sun painting the snow-covered landscape in shades of rose and gold. Thomas Wheeler prepared the sleigh, while Martha packed provisions for the journey, fresh bread, dried meat, and a stone heated in the fire to keep Abigail's feet warm. "The trail should be good after yesterday's sun," Thomas said, as he helped Abigail into the sleigh. "We'll reach Thorne's place by mid-morning." Martha tucked the buffalo robe around Abigail's legs. "Remember what I said, child. Follow your heart." With a jingle of bells and a flick of the reins, They set off, leaving the small settlement behind. Abigail's emotions wavered between anticipation and anxiety. What would Nathaniel's reaction be to the letter? To her return? She had rehearsed various approaches in her mind, but none seemed adequate to the complexity of the situation. The journey passed more quickly than she expected. Before she was fully prepared, the Thorne homestead appeared on the horizon, smoke rising steadily from the chimney against the clear blue sky. As they drew nearer, Abigail noticed something unexpected. A second sleigh parked in the yard, one she didn't recognize. "Thomas," she began, but the blacksmith had already noticed. "That's Victor Hayward's cutter," he said, his tone darkening. "Hannah's brother from back east. What's he doing here?" Before Abigail could respond, the front door of the house opened. Catherine burst out running toward the approaching sleigh with abandon. Behind her came Nathaniel, followed by a well-dressed man Abigail didn't recognize. "Miss Porter," Catherine cried, reaching the sleigh just as Thomas drew it to a halt. "You came back! I knew you would!" Abigail climbed down, barely keeping her balance, as Catherine flung herself into her arms. Over the child's head, she met Nathaniel's gaze. His expression registered surprise, then something warmer, before settling into careful neutrality. "Miss Porter," he said, approaching more sedately than his daughter, "this is unexpected. I received Catherine's letter," Abigail explained, still holding the girl close. "And I found something important that belongs to you." Before Nathaniel could respond, the stranger stepped forward. He was a handsome man in his mid-40s, expensively dressed, despite the frontier setting, with features that reminded Abigail of Hannah's photographs. "Another visitor," he said, his accent revealing Eastern origins. "How fortunate. I'm Victor Hayward, Catherine's uncle." "Abigail Porter," she replied, instinctively disliking his condescending tone. "I'm a friend of the Thornes. A very recent friend, I understand." Victor's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Well, this is providential. I was just explaining to Nathaniel that I've come to take Catherine back east where she can receive a proper upbringing." Shock rendered Abigail momentarily speechless. Catherine's grip on her tightened. "I'm not going," the girl said fiercely. "I belong here, with Papa." Thomas Wheeler had dismounted and now stood beside Abigail. "What's this about Hayward? You can't just appear after 3 years and claim the child." Victor's expression hardened. "I believe I can. I have papers granting me guardianship, signed by a Boston judge. Catherine is my sister's only child, and I have a duty to ensure she's raised properly." "She is being raised properly," Nathaniel said, his voice low but intense. "This is her home." "A crude cabin in the wilderness, miles from proper schooling or society," Victor scoffed. "Hannah would never have wanted this life for her daughter. She agreed to it for herself, but Catherine deserves better." Abigail felt the child trembling against her. "Catherine seems very happy and well cared for here," she said, keeping her tone measured despite her rising anger. "Mr. Thorne is clearly a devoted father." Victor turned his cold gaze on her. "With respect, Miss Porter, you hardly know the situation. I have concerns beyond the material conditions. There are questions about Mr. Thorne's past that make his fitness as a guardian dubious at best." Nathaniel's face paled. "That's enough, Hayward." "Is it?" Victor produced a folded document from his coat. "I've been making inquiries. According to military records, a man matching your description deserted from the Union Army in 1863. A deserter raising my sister's child. The judge found that quite compelling." Thomas stepped forward. "Now wait just a minute." "It's all right, Thomas," Nathaniel interrupted, his voice strained. "Mr. Hayward is correct about one thing. There are aspects of my past that I haven't been forthcoming about. Papa didn't do anything wrong, Catherine cried, tears spilling down her cheeks. Tell them, Miss Porter. All eyes turned to Abigail, who found herself at the center of a situation far more complex than she had anticipated. The letter in her medical bag seemed to burn through the leather, demanding to be revealed. Perhaps we should continue this discussion inside, she suggested, her nurse's instincts responding to Catherine's distress. The cold isn't good for anyone, especially Catherine. Nathaniel nodded gratefully. Yes, please, all of you, come inside. The group moved into the house, where the fire had been built up against the morning chill. Catherine refused to leave Abigail's side, clinging to her hand as if it were a lifeline. Nathaniel gestured everyone to seats around the table. Though Victor remained standing, his posture suggesting he considered himself above the rustic surroundings. I'll be brief, he said when they were settled. I've come to take Catherine to Boston, where she will receive education befitting Hannah's daughter. I have legal documents supporting my guardianship. He placed the papers on the table. I'm prepared to leave tomorrow. No, Catherine cried. I won't go. This is my home. Nathaniel placed a calming hand on his daughter's shoulder, though Abigail could see the tension in his frame. Victor, we've discussed this. Catherine belongs here with me. I'm her father. Are you? Victor's voice carried a dangerous edge. Hannah never spoke much about your background, Thorne, or should I say Reed. The name hung in the air like a gunshot. Nathaniel's expression froze, his hand tightening slightly on Catherine's shoulder. What are you implying? Thomas demanded. I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts. Victor tapped the papers before him. Nathaniel Reed deserted from the 20th Massachusetts Infantry in 1863. He disappeared, and shortly thereafter, a man calling himself Nathaniel Thorne appeared in Wyoming Territory. No family history, no references, nothing to connect him to a past. He met my sister, married her, and now claims the right to raise her child, despite his criminal background. You're twisting things, Nathaniel said, his voice tight. You don't know the whole story. I know enough. A deserter, possibly a thief, given the coincidence of names. Is that who should raise Hannah's daughter? The courts think not. Catherine began to cry in earnest, now burying her face against Abigail's side. The sound of her distress broke through Abigail's shock, galvanizing her to action. Mr. Hayward, she said sharply, your accusations are causing your niece great distress. Whatever your concerns about Mr. Thorne's past, surely Catherine's current well-being should be your primary consideration. Victor had the grace to look slightly abashed. Of course, I don't mean to upset the child, but these are serious matters that cannot be ignored. I agree, Abigail said, reaching for her medical bag. Which is why I believe this is the time to share something I've carried for far too long. All eyes turned to her as she withdrew the music box and the letter it had contained. She looked directly at Nathaniel, whose expression had shifted from defensiveness to confusion. Mr. Thorne, Nathaniel, this belongs to you. Or rather, it was meant for you, though I didn't know it until yesterday. She handed him the letter, watching as recognition dawned in his eyes at the handwriting. His hands trembled slightly as he unfolded it. What is this? Victor demanded. A letter from James Thorne written shortly before his death at a field hospital near Appomattox, Abigail explained, keeping her gaze on Nathaniel as he read. I was his nurse during those final days. The color drained from Nathaniel's face as he absorbed the letter's contents. He looked up at Abigail, his eyes filled with a mixture of disbelief, grief, and something like wonder. You knew James. His voice was barely above a whisper. I cared for him in his final hours, Abigail confirmed. He entrusted me with this music box and asked me to find you someday, to tell you he was proud of your sacrifice. What sacrifice? Victor asked, his confident demeanor slipping for the first time. Nathaniel stood slowly still, holding the letter. I didn't desert the army, Victor. I took my brother's place when his heart condition would have prevented his service. We exchanged identities. He became Nathaniel Reed, staying behind, while I served as James Thorne. That's preposterous, Victor stammered, but Thomas Wheeler was nodding. It makes sense now, the way you never speak of your time before Red Pine, the nightmares Catherine mentioned, the headaches from that old wound. He gestured to the scar visible at Nathaniel's temple. Antietam, Nathaniel confirmed quietly. A shell burst nearby. When I recovered, I learned James had been drafted despite his condition. I couldn't let him go. It would have killed him even without combat. So we switched places. I served in his stead, and he kept our mother's farm running. Then why not come forward after the war? Victor challenged. Why maintain the deception? Because officially, Nathaniel Reed was a deserter. Returning to my true identity would have meant prison at best, execution at worst. His voice hardened. I chose to remain James Thorne to honor my brother's memory. When I met Hannah, I told her everything. She understood the necessity of secrecy. Victor sank into a chair, his certainty visibly crumbling. Hannah knew. She knew. She kept my secret, just as she would have wanted Catherine protected from the stigma of having a father branded as a deserter. Nathaniel placed the letter gently on the table. I am not the criminal you paint me to be, Victor. I made a choice to protect my brother, just as I've made choices to protect my daughter. A heavy silence fell over the room, broken only by Catherine's quieting sniffles. Finally, Thomas Wheeler spoke. Seems to me, Hayward, your case has just lost its foundation. Nathaniel's no deserter. He's a war hero who sacrificed his own identity to save his brother's life. Any judge worth his salt would recognize that as a mark of character, not criminality. Victor looked from Thomas to Nathaniel to Abigail, clearly reassessing the situation. This changes things, he admitted reluctantly, though I still have concerns about Catherine's education and future prospects in this wilderness. Catherine is thriving here, Abigail said firmly. She's reading and calculating at levels beyond her years thanks to her father's dedicated teaching. And she has something equally valuable, a sense of belonging and security that many children in proper society lack entirely. As if to confirm this assessment, Catherine finally released her grip on Abigail to move to her father's side. Please, don't make me go, Uncle Victor, she pleaded. I want to stay with Papa. And Miss Porter, she added, glancing hopefully at Abigail. Victor's expression softened slightly as he looked at his niece. You truly wish to remain here, Catherine, even knowing you could have fine dresses, proper schooling companions your own age. This is home, Catherine said simply. Papa needs me. The plain truth of a child, delivered without artifice or calculation, seemed to reach Victor in a way that adult arguments couldn't. He sighed deeply. Hannah always was stubborn about her choices. It seems her daughter has inherited that trait. He gathered his papers, tapping them into a neat stack. I will need to reconsider my position. Relief washed over Nathaniel's face. Thank you, Victor. I know your concern for Catherine comes from love for Hannah. We share that, at least. The atmosphere in the room lightened perceptibly. Thomas Wheeler stood reaching for his coat. Well, I should be getting back to town before Martha sends out a search party. Victor, you're welcome to follow if you'd prefer more comfortable accommodations than Nathaniel can offer. Victor nodded clearly, eager to retreat and regroup. Yes, I think that would be best. I'll return tomorrow to discuss this further when emotions are less raw. As the men prepared to leave, Catherine tugged at Abigail's hand. You're staying, aren't you, Miss Porter? You came back. All eyes turned to Abigail, who suddenly found herself at another crossroads. She looked at Nathaniel, trying to read his expression. His face revealed little, but his eyes held a question, perhaps the same one she herself couldn't yet answer. For now, she said gently, we have much to discuss. Thomas gave her a knowing look as he buttoned his coat. I'll leave your trunk for the time being, then. Martha packed enough provisions for a few days just in case. Victor appeared confused by this exchange, but made no comment as he collected his own belongings. Within minutes, both men had departed, leaving Abigail alone with Nathaniel and Catherine, in a silence laden with unspoken questions. Catherine broke it first. Did you really take care of Uncle James, Papa's brother? Abigail moved to the fire, grateful for its warmth as she gathered her thoughts. Yes, I did. He was very brave, and he loved your father very much. Is that why you came back? Because of the letter? Such directness deserved equal honesty. Partly, but I also came back because of your letter, Catherine, and because, she hesitated, then continued, because I found myself missing this place, missing both of you. Catherine's face lit up. I knew it. I told Papa you'd come back. I could tell you belonged here. Nathaniel cleared his throat gently. Catherine, why don't you go to your room for a while? Miss Porter and I need to talk. The girl looked between them, clearly reluctant to miss any part of what promised to be an important conversation. But, please, Katie, just for a little while. With obvious reluctance, Catherine retreated to her bedroom, though Abigail suspected she would be listening at the door. When they were alone, Nathaniel picked up James's letter again, reading it through a second time. All these years, he said finally, I wondered what happened to him at the end, whether he suffered, whether he understood why I couldn't be there. He understood, Abigail assured him. He spoke of you with great pride and love. His only regret was that he couldn't tell you himself how much your sacrifice meant to him. Nathaniel's eyes glistened with emotion. And you've carried this message all this time, not knowing who it was meant for. The music box was entrusted to me for safekeeping. I never knew about the hidden compartment until yesterday. She paused, then added, I've been searching for you for 3 years, Nathaniel, without even knowing it. He looked up sharply at that something kindling in his gaze. And now that you've found me, delivered James's message, what comes next for you, Abigail Porter? It was the question she had asked herself throughout the sleepless night, the question that had followed her across the snowy miles this morning. What did come next? A safe position in Cheyenne? A return to the East? Or something entirely unexpected, a new life here, with this man and his remarkable daughter? I don't know, she admitted. When I came west, I thought I was following a clear path. Then everything changed. Now I find myself at another crossroads with no map to guide me. Perhaps you don't need a map, Nathaniel suggested softly. Perhaps sometimes we know the way without one. He moved closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of darker blue in his eyes, the subtle lines etched by years of sun and worry at their corners. Catherine believes you belong here, he said. She's remarkably perceptive for her age. And what do you believe, Nathaniel? His gaze held hers steadily. I believe that fate rarely gives second chances, that when it does, only a fool would turn away. The echo of Martha Wheeler's words struck Abigail forcibly. Are you calling me a fool, Mr. Thorne? A small smile touched his lips. Never. But I might be one myself if I let you leave again without speaking my heart. He took her hands in his, the calluses on his palms rough against her skin. I've known you less than a week, Abigail Porter. In that time, you've saved my daughter from nightmares, eased my pain, and now delivered my brother's final message. You've brought light back to a home that has known too much darkness. Nathaniel, please, let me finish. His grip tightened slightly. I don't know what the future holds. I can't promise it will be easy. But I do know that when you left, something essential went with you, something I thought I'd never feel again after Hannah died. The vulnerability in his confession touched Abigail deeply. I felt it too, she admitted. This sense of belonging, of rightness. It frightened me. It frightens me as well. His voice dropped lower. But I'm tired of letting fear dictate my choices. Tired of hiding behind duty and grief and the past. From Catherine's bedroom came a soft, familiar melody, the music box tune hummed by a child who had adopted it as her own. The simple sound seemed to connect them all. Catherine, Nathaniel, Abigail, even James and Hannah linked across time and space by this thread of music. I can't promise to be the perfect wife or mother, Abigail said quietly. I'm a nurse first, it's part of who I am. I'll need to use those skills to help others beyond just our family. Our family, Nathaniel repeated as if testing the words. Is that what you want, Abigail, to be part of this family, imperfect as it is? The question hung between them, pregnant with possibility. Abigail thought of all the paths that had led her here, the war's chaos, Emily's death, the hospital's closure, Catherine's deception, the blizzard that nearly killed her, the hidden letter in the music box. Coincidences upon coincidences, or something more deliberate? Yes, she said simply. I believe I do. Relief and joy transformed Nathaniel's face. Before he could respond, a small sound from the bedroom doorway drew their attention. Catherine stood there, eyes, wide hope, written plainly across her features. Does this mean you're staying, Miss Porter, forever? Abigail looked from the child to her father, feeling a certainty settle within her that had been absent for too long. If your father asks me properly, and if you're willing to share him with me. Ask her, Papa, Catherine urged, practically bouncing with excitement. Ask her right now. Nathaniel laughed, a free, unguarded sound that Abigail realized she had never heard from him before. Is that how it's done? No courtship, no proper waiting period. We've waited long enough, Abigail said softly. All of us. Understanding dawned in his eyes. He kept her hands in his as he lowered himself to one knee, his gaze never leaving her face. Abigail Porter, will you marry me? Will you join our family, not as the bride Catherine ordered by mail, but as the woman I've come to admire and care for? Will you help me raise my daughter, build a life in this wilderness, and perhaps find joy again after so much sorrow? The question was everything she hadn't known she was waiting for. Simple, honest, without pretense or calculation. A new beginning built on truth rather than deception. Yes, she said, her voice steady despite the emotion welling within her. Yes, I will. Catherine's joyful whoop broke the solemn moment. She launched herself at both adults, nearly toppling them over. I knew it. I knew you'd stay. Knew you were meant to be my new mama. Nathaniel rose, keeping one arm around his daughter, while the other encircled Abigail's waist. It seems my daughter's deception has led to an unexpected blessing, he said, his voice husky with emotion. Perhaps I should thank her for her meddling. Perhaps you should, Abigail agreed, smiling at Catherine's triumphant expression. The following morning dawned bright and cold sunlight glinting off the pristine snow surrounding the Thorne homestead. Inside, warmth and the aroma of fresh coffee filled the main room. Abigail stood at the stove, carefully turning strips of bacon in a cast-iron skillet, while Nathaniel set the table. Catherine had yet to wake exhausted from the previous day's emotional turbulence. She'll be surprised to find breakfast ready without her help, Nathaniel observed, placing cups at each setting. She's taken that responsibility very seriously since Hannah died. Children often assume adult roles when they sense a void, Abigail replied, transferring the bacon to a waiting plate. It's their way of maintaining order in a world that suddenly seems chaotic. Nathaniel paused, a fork in his hand. You understand her so well already. I've worked with many children who've lost parents during the war and after. Abigail poured coffee for them both. They're remarkably resilient, but they need consistency to feel secure. Is that why you said yes? Nathaniel asked quietly. For Catherine's sake. The question caught her off guard. She set the coffee pot down carefully, gathering her thoughts. Catherine is part of it, she admitted, but not all. I wouldn't have agreed to marriage simply to provide stability for a child, no matter how deserving. Relief softened his features. I needed to hear that. Doubt already, Mr. Thorne, she teased gently, taking a seat across from him. Not doubt, caution. He met her gaze directly. Everything has happened so quickly. Yesterday morning you were in Red Pine preparing to leave for Cheyenne. Today you're wearing my mother's ring and planning to become my wife. Abigail glanced down at the simple silver band adorning her finger, a family heirloom Nathaniel had retrieved from a small wooden box the previous evening. Second thoughts? None, he assured her quickly. But I want you to be certain. This life, he gestured around them, is not what you envisioned when you left Boston. No, she agreed. It's not. But life rarely follows our carefully constructed plans. She reached across the table to touch his hand. I'm here because I choose to be Nathaniel. Because something about this place, this family, about you, feels right in a way nothing has since before the war. His fingers closed around hers. I feel it too. As if all the wrong turns somehow led to exactly where we were meant to be. The sound of small feet padding across the floor interrupted the moment. Catherine appeared in her nightgown, hair tousled from sleep, eyes widening at the scene before her. You made breakfast without me, she exclaimed, rushing to Abigail's side. And you're still here. I was afraid I dreamed it all. Abigail smoothed the child's wild hair. Not a dream, though it does feel rather dreamlike, doesn't it? The best dream ever. Catherine climbed onto her chair, eyes darting between the adults. When will you marry Papa? Tomorrow, next week. Nathaniel chuckled. These things take time, Katie. There are preparations, announcements. But not too much time, Catherine insisted. Uncle Victor might change his mind and try to take me away again. A shadow crossed Nathaniel's face. Victor has no legal standing now that the truth about my identity has been revealed. His claims were based on assumptions that have been proven false. He'll return today as promised, Abigail reminded them, serving Catherine a plate of eggs and bacon. We should prepare for that conversation. What will we tell him? Catherine asked anxiously. The truth, Nathaniel said firmly. That's always the best course, even when difficult.
Breakfast passed with lighter conversation, Catherine eagerly sharing her plans for the wedding, most involving far more flowers than Wyoming in December could possibly provide. Her enthusiasm was infectious, drawing smiles from both adults, despite the uncertainty that lay ahead with Victor's imminent return. After the meal, Nathaniel retreated to his workshop to complete an order of chairs for the church, while Abigail helped Catherine with her arithmetic lessons. The domestic rhythm felt natural, as if Abigail had been part of this household far longer than a mere few days. Mid-morning brought the sound of approaching sleigh bells. Catherine tensed immediately, pressing closer to Abigail's side. "It's him," she whispered. "Uncle Victor." Nathaniel emerged from his workshop, wiping wood dust from his hands. "I'll speak with him," he said calmly. "Catherine, stay with Abigail." "No," Catherine protested. "I want to be there. It's about me." Nathaniel hesitated, then nodded. "Very well, but remember what we've discussed about respectful behavior even when upset." The sleigh came into view, not just Victor's cutter, but Thomas Wheeler's larger conveyance as well. The two men drove into the yard, accompanied by a third figure Abigail recognized as the local pastor, Reverend Morrison. "What's this?" Nathaniel murmured, frowning slightly. "I didn't expect a delegation." The three men disembarked, stamping snow from their boots before approaching the porch where Nathaniel now stood. Victor appeared more subdued than the previous day, his elegant attire somewhat at odds with the frontier setting. "Thorne," he greeted with a stiff nod. "May we come inside? There are matters to discuss." "Of course." Nathaniel stepped back, holding the door. "You're all welcome." The party filed into the main room where Abigail stood with Catherine. Thomas Wheeler offered her a reassuring smile, while Reverend Morrison, a kindly man in his 60s, removed his hat respectfully. "Miss Porter," Victor acknowledged her presence with obvious surprise. "I didn't expect to find you still here." Before Abigail could respond, Catherine spoke up proudly. "Miss Porter is going to marry Papa. She's staying forever." Victor's eyebrows rose sharply. "Indeed, that's remarkably sudden, yet not entirely surprising," Thomas interjected with a knowing look at Abigail. "Some connections form quickly, but run deep." Nathaniel gestured toward the table. "Please sit. Can I offer coffee?" Once everyone was settled with steaming cups, an awkward silence descended. Finally, Victor cleared his throat. "I've given considerable thought to yesterday's revelations," he began formally. "After consulting with Reverend Morrison and Mr. Wheeler, I've reached a decision regarding Catherine's future." Nathaniel's hand found Abigail's beneath the table, his grip firm but trembling slightly. "And what have you decided?" Victor set his cup down deliberately. "I withdraw my petition for guardianship." The simple statement sent a wave of relief through the room. Catherine exhaled audibly while Nathaniel's posture relaxed marginally. "Thank you, Victor," he said quietly. "That means more than I can express." "Don't misunderstand," Victor cautioned. "I still have concerns about Catherine's upbringing in such isolation. But," he glanced at Thomas and the Reverend, "I've been persuaded that separating her from her father would cause more harm than good." "A wise conclusion," Abigail commented, earning a sharp glance from Victor. "As for your announcement," he continued, looking between Nathaniel and Abigail, "I must say it seems precipitous. You've known each other how long? A week?" "Sometimes a week is sufficient," Reverend Morrison said mildly, speaking for the first time. "I knew my Margaret was the one after our first church social." Victor waved this aside. "Different times, different circumstances. Miss Porter, I must ask if you've fully considered what you're undertaking, not just marriage to a virtual stranger, but life in this wilderness, raising a child,
not your own. His presumption rankled, but Abigail kept her tone measured. I appreciate your concern, Mr. Hayward, but I'm hardly rushing into this blindly. I served as a nurse during the war, witnessing humanity at its worst and best. I've made difficult decisions before and lived with their consequences. Besides, Thomas added with a twinkle in his eye, if she could survive a Wyoming blizzard alone, I'd wager she can handle whatever else comes her way. A smile tugged at Nathaniel's lips, though he quickly suppressed it. Victor, I understand your skepticism. If our positions were reversed, I might share it. But I ask you to trust that this decision wasn't made lightly by either of us. Victor studied them both, his expression softening incrementally. Hannah would have liked you, Miss Porter. She valued directness and courage. High praise, Abigail acknowledged. I wish I could have known her. She'd be pleased to see Catherine so attached to you. He sighed deeply. Very well. I'll not oppose this union, unexpected as it is. But I do have one condition. Nathaniel tensed again. Which is that Catherine be permitted extended visits to Boston. Not now, but perhaps in a year or two. She should know her mother's family, her heritage. That seems reasonable, Nathaniel conceded, looking to Abigail for confirmation. She nodded her agreement. Excellent. Victor produced a document from his coat. I've prepared a formal withdrawal of my guardianship petition. Reverend Morrison has agreed to witness it. As Victor signed with a flourish, Catherine slipped from her chair to stand between Nathaniel and Abigail, a physical manifestation of the family they were becoming. The child's relief was palpable, her small body finally relaxing after days of tension. There's one more matter, Thomas Wheeler said when the document was complete. Reverend Morrison didn't come just to witness papers. He thought you might want to discuss wedding arrangements. Reverend Morrison smiled kindly. Indeed. I understand congratulations are in order. Victor stood abruptly. I believe my business here is concluded. If you'll excuse me, I'll await you in the sleigh, Thomas. After he had departed, an awkward silence fell, broken by Catherine's eager voice. Can you marry them today, Reverend, right now? The elderly pastor chuckled. While I appreciate your enthusiasm, young lady marriages generally require some preparation. Banns to be read, arrangements to be made. But we don't want to wait, Catherine insisted. What if something happens? Catherine, Nathaniel admonished gently. The Reverend is right. These things shouldn't be rushed. Abigail, however, found herself considering Catherine's anxious expression. The child had already lost one mother. Her fear of losing a potential second was understandable. And in truth, what benefit would come from delay? Their circumstances were unusual by any standard. Reverend Morrison, she said thoughtfully, how much preparation is strictly necessary? Legally speaking, the pastor blinked in surprise. Well, technically only the couple's consent, 2 witnesses, and my blessing. But traditionally, we've hardly been traditional thus far, Abigail pointed out with a small smile. And while I have no wish to seem impulsive, I see little advantage in waiting. Nathaniel looked at her in astonishment. Abigail, are you suggesting that we marry sooner rather than later? Yes, I believe I am. She turned to face him fully. Unless you prefer a longer engagement. For a moment he seemed speechless. Then a slow smile spread across his face, transforming his features. No, he said simply. I see no reason to wait. Catherine could barely contain her excitement. Today, can it be today? Reverend Morrison stroked his beard thoughtfully. Most unusual, though in frontier conditions, adaptations are sometimes necessary. He glanced at Thomas, who nodded encouragement. Very well. I could return this afternoon with Mrs. Morrison. She'd never forgive me if I performed a wedding without her presence." "That would be perfect," Abigail said, surprising herself with the certainty she felt. "Thank you, Reverend." After the men departed, Thomas to return Victor to town, Reverend Morrison to fetch his wife. The three remaining occupants of the house looked at each other in shared amazement. "Did we just arrange a wedding for today?" Nathaniel asked, sounding slightly dazed. "We did indeed," Abigail confirmed. Having second thoughts, Mr. Thorne, his expression sobered. "None, but I worry you might feel pressured by Catherine's anxiety or Victor's presence." "I've never been one to make decisions based on external pressures," Abigail assured him. "My mind is my own, as are my choices." Catherine tugged at Abigail's skirt. "Do you have a pretty dress Mama wore blue when she married Papa? I saw the picture." The practical question grounded the moment, shifting focus from the momentous decision to its tangible details. "I have a green dress with some lace at the collar," Abigail replied. "It's the nicest one I brought west." "We should decorate," Catherine declared, "with pine boughs and ribbons." As the child raced off to plan their impromptu wedding, Nathaniel took Abigail's hands in his. "Are you certain, Abigail, truly certain?" She met his gaze steadily. "I am. It may seem hasty to others, but I feel more confidence in this decision than in many I've made after months of deliberation." "As do I." He raised her hands to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "I never expected to find happiness again after Hannah. Never thought I'd want to." "Life has a way of surprising us," Abigail said softly. "Just when we think our path is set, a blizzard comes and changes everything." The hours that followed passed in a flurry of preparation. Catherine proved herself an enthusiastic wedding planner, directing the arrangement of pine boughs over the mantel and insisting that Abigail's hair be adorned with a ribbon she'd been saving for a special occasion. Nathaniel disappeared briefly to his workshop, returning with a mysterious wrapped package that he refused to explain. By mid-afternoon, the small cabin had been transformed. Fresh pine scented the air, its deep green boughs adorning the mantel and table. Candles stood ready to be lit as dusk approached. The floor had been swept, the windows polished to sparkling. In her borrowed room, Abigail donned her best dress of forest green wool with modest lace at the collar and cuffs, and arranged her hair in a simple but elegant style. Catherine burst in without knocking her own hair freshly braided and her best dress carefully pressed. "You look beautiful," she exclaimed. "Like a princess in my storybook." Abigail smiled at the child's enthusiasm. "Thank you, Catherine. You look quite lovely yourself." "Papa says I'm the flower girl, but we don't have flowers in winter, so I'm going to carry this." She proudly displayed a small bouquet of pine branches tied with a faded blue ribbon. "And I have this for you." From her pocket, she produced a similar arrangement, slightly larger and adorned with a white ribbon. "It's perfect," Abigail said, sincerely accepting the makeshift bouquet. "Thank you, Catherine." The girl hesitated suddenly, serious. "After today, what should I call you, Miss Porter? Doesn't seem right anymore." The question touched Abigail deeply. "What would you like to call me?" "Could I call you Mama? Not right away, if that's too strange. But someday." Vulnerability shone in the child's eyes. Abigail knelt to Catherine's level, careful of her dress. "I would be honored if you called me Mama, whenever you feel ready. I know I can never replace your mother, but I promise to love you as my own child." Catherine flung her arms around Abigail's neck. "I think I love you already," she whispered. The sound of sleigh bells announced the arrival of Reverend and Mrs. Morrison, along with Thomas and Martha Wheeler. Catherine pulled away, excitement returning. "They're here. It's time." Abigail took a deep breath, smoothing her dress one final time. This was not how she had imagined her wedding day, if she had imagined it at all. No family present, no elaborate church ceremony, no months of careful preparation. Just a simple frontier cabin, a handful of near strangers as witnesses, and a child practically vibrating with anticipation. Yet, it felt right. More right than anything had in a very long time. She emerged from the room to find Nathaniel waiting, dressed in what was clearly his Sunday best: clean trousers, a white shirt with no visible mending, and a dark waistcoat she hadn't seen before. He had trimmed his beard and combed his hair neatly back from his forehead, making the scar at his temple more visible. The sight of it, evidence of his sacrifice and survival, moved Abigail unexpectedly. His eyes widened as she approached. "You're beautiful," he said simply. "As are you, Mr. Thorne." She smiled, allowing her gaze to convey what words could not. Reverend Morrison cleared his throat gently. "If the bride and groom are ready, we might begin." The ceremony itself was brief but meaningful. Standing before the fireplace with pine boughs overhead and Catherine between them, they exchanged vows that were ancient in their simplicity, yet new in their personal significance. Abigail felt a sense of rightness as she pledged herself to this man, this child, this life so different from anything she had planned. When Reverend Morrison pronounced them husband and wife, Nathaniel's kiss was gentle but firm, a promise more binding than the words they had just spoken. Catherine's delighted clapping broke the solemnity of the moment, drawing laughter from everyone present. Martha Wheeler produced a small cake she had baked that morning, while Thomas revealed a bottle of brandy, saved for special occasions. The modest wedding feast that followed filled the small cabin with warmth and congratulations. As dusk fell, the guests prepared to depart. Martha embraced Abigail tightly. "I told you to follow your heart," she whispered. "I'm glad you listened." Thank you," Abigail replied sincerely, "for everything." After the sleighs had disappeared down the snow-covered trail, an unexpected shyness fell between the newlyweds. Catherine, oblivious to the subtle shift in atmosphere, chattered happily as she helped clear away the remains of their small celebration. "This was the best day ever," she declared carefully, wrapping the leftover cake. "Even better than when Papa finished my rocking horse last Christmas." "High praise indeed," Nathaniel said with a smile, his eyes never leaving Abigail. "Katie, it's getting late. Time for bed, I think." The child's face fell briefly before brightening again. "Will you both tuck me in as a family?" "Of course," Abigail assured her. "Go prepare for bed, and we'll be there shortly." After Catherine had scampered off, Nathaniel approached Abigail slowly. "Mrs. Thorne," he said, testing the name, "I have something for you." From behind his back, he produced the wrapped package she had noticed earlier. "A wedding gift," he explained, "though not a traditional one, perhaps." Curious Abigail unwrapped the brown paper to reveal a wooden box similar to her music box, but larger, its surface polished to a soft glow. Intricate carvings adorned the lid, pine trees, mountains, and stars forming a border around 3 entwined initials, NC and A. "Nathaniel," she breathed, "it's beautiful." "Open it," he urged gently. Inside the box was divided into compartments lined with soft fabric. Each section held small bottles and containers, a perfectly designed case for her medical supplies. "I noticed your current bag was wearing thin," Nathaniel explained, "and the bottles rattled together. This should keep everything organized and protected." The thoughtfulness of the gift touched Abigail deeply. Unlike jewelry
or frivolous trinkets, this acknowledged and supported her identity as a healer. "You made this in one afternoon. I started it the day after you arrived," he admitted, "though I didn't know then who it would be for. It just felt right to make it." "Thank you." She ran her fingers over the smooth wood, the perfect compartments. "This means more than I can say." From Catherine's room came an impatient call. "I'm ready. Are you coming?" They shared a smile at the child's enthusiasm. "We shouldn't keep her waiting," Abigail said. "Not tonight." Tucking Catherine into bed as a family reading from her favorite book, answering her endless questions about their new arrangements, and finally kissing her forehead as her eyes grew heavy, felt like the true culmination of their wedding day. More than vows or rings, this simple ritual sealed their union. When they finally closed Catherine's door, leaving her drifting into contented sleep, the shyness returned. They stood in the main room, the fire's glow casting warm light across the floor, suddenly awkward after the day's certainty. "I've prepared the attic room," Nathaniel said quietly, "but if you prefer your own space for now, I understand completely." Abigail appreciated his consideration, his willingness to proceed at whatever pace she set. "Thank you," she said, "but I think tonight of all nights we shouldn't be apart." Relief and something deeper flashed in his eyes. "I hoped you would say that." Later, as moonlight spilled through the small attic window painting silver patterns across the wooden floor, Abigail lay beside her new husband, her head resting on his shoulder. The intimacy they had shared had been tender, respectful, occasionally awkward, but ultimately profound, a physical expression of the commitment they had made before witnesses hours earlier. "What are you thinking?" Nathaniel asked softly, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "That life takes strange and wonderful turns," she replied truthfully. "A week ago, I was lost in a blizzard, certain I would die. Now I'm here a wife and mother in a home I never knew I was seeking." He tightened his arm around her. "When Hannah died, I thought that part of my life was over, that Catherine and I would continue alone making the best of what remained." His voice dropped lower. "I never expected to feel this again, this sense of possibility of future." "Nor did I." Abigail shifted to look into his eyes. "After the war, after Emily died, I focused entirely on my work. It seemed safer than opening myself to loss again. And now—" She considered the question, feeling the solid warmth of him beside her, hearing Catherine's soft breathing from the room below. "Now I think perhaps safety is overrated, that love, even with its risks, is worth embracing." His kiss was answer enough. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft flakes drifting past the window like scattered stars, nature's blessing on the newly formed family sleeping peacefully within. Winter yielded gradually to spring snow, retreating inch by inch to reveal the dormant land beneath. The Thorne homestead underwent its own transformation, as winter routines gave way to the busy activity of the new season. Fields needed preparation, garden plots required turning, and the root cellar demanded emptying and cleaning. For Abigail, the transition from visitor to wife and mother had proven remarkably smooth. The skills that had served her in field hospitals, adaptability, resourcefulness, and calm under pressure, translated well to frontier life. She approached each new challenge with practical determination, whether learning to manage sourdough starter or helping Nathaniel repair winter damage to the barn roof. Catherine had blossomed under the new arrangement, her natural exuberance finding fresh outlets as she eagerly shared her knowledge of homestead life with her new mother. She had begun calling Abigail Mama within days of the wedding, the name falling from her lips as naturally as if it had always belonged there. The changes in Nathaniel were more subtle, but no less profound.
The reserved, wary man who had greeted Abigail upon her arrival had gradually given way to someone more open, more prone to laughter. The headaches that had plagued him diminished in both frequency and intensity, whether from Abigail's remedies or from the easing of long-carried tensions she couldn't say with certainty. On a mild April morning, with the last patches of snow melting in shaded hollows, Abigail stood in the doorway of the newly expanded garden plot, surveying her handiwork. The ground had been turned and amended with compost, ready for the seeds Catherine was carefully sorting on the porch steps. "Mama," the girl called, holding up 2 small paper packets. "Should we plant the carrots next to the peas or the beans?" "The peas, I think," Abigail replied. "They'll be harvested earlier, giving the carrots room to grow." Their domestic discussion was interrupted by the sound of approaching hoofbeats. A rider appeared around the bend in the trail. Thomas Wheeler, his horse moving at a brisk trot. "Thomas," Abigail called, waving a soil-covered hand, "what brings you out this way?" The blacksmith dismounted with a grunt, leading his horse into the yard. "Mail from back east," he announced, patting his saddlebag. "Came in on yesterday's stage. Something for you, Mrs. Thorne." Abigail wiped her hands on her apron, surprised. "For me, who would write to me here. Return address says Boston General Hospital." Thomas extracted an official-looking envelope from his bag. "Looks important." Catherine abandoned her seed packets, rushing to Abigail's side. "What is it? Mama, is something wrong? I'm sure it's nothing concerning." Abigail reassured her, though uncertainty fluttered in her chest as she accepted the envelope. "Why don't you fetch Papa from the woodlot? Tell him Thomas is here." When Catherine had dashed off, Thomas studied Abigail's expression. "Unexpected news." "Very. I haven't corresponded with anyone at Boston General since I left." She turned the envelope over, noting the careful handwriting, Dr. William Ellsworth, Chief of Surgery. "It must have taken some effort to locate me." "Want me to make myself scarce while you read it?" Thomas offered. Abigail shook her head. "No need. Please come inside. I'll put coffee on." By the time Nathaniel and Catherine returned, sweaty from log splitting, Abigail had composed herself enough to greet them normally, though the unopened letter seemed to burn in her apron pocket. Coffee was poured, pleasantries exchanged, and Thomas's news from town shared before Nathaniel finally noticed Abigail's unusual quietness. "Is everything all right?" he asked, his gaze concerned. "I received a letter," she explained, withdrawing the envelope, "from my former supervisor at Boston General." Nathaniel frowned slightly. "After all this time, what does he want?" "I haven't opened it yet." Abigail ran her finger along the sealed edge. "I was waiting for you." "Well, go on then," Thomas encouraged. "Must be important if they tracked you all the way to Wyoming." With a deep breath, Abigail broke the seal and unfolded the letter inside. The handwriting was familiar, Dr. Sir. Ellsworth's precise economical script that she had deciphered on countless medical charts during her years at the hospital. March 12, 1879. Dear Miss Porter or Mrs. Thorne, as I understand you may now be, I hope this letter finds you well in your new surroundings. It took considerable effort to locate you, requiring inquiries through the Western Bride Society and eventually the postmaster in Red Pine, Wyoming Territory. I write regarding a matter of some importance. Boston General Hospital is expanding its operations to include a new wing dedicated exclusively to women's and children's medicine. This development, long advocated by yourself and other forward-thinking members of our staff, has finally received funding from several prominent Boston families. The Board of Directors has instructed me to offer you the position of head nurse for this new department, with responsibilities including training of staff, development of procedures, and implementation of the modern nursing techniques you championed during your tenure here. I realize this offer comes after your departure, under less than ideal circumstances. The reduction in staff that led to your dismissal is now universally regarded as short-sighted. The hospital is prepared to offer a substantial increase in salary and accommodations to secure your return. Please telegraph your response at your earliest convenience. If favorable arrangements can be made for your journey east as soon as May. With highest regards, William Ellsworth, M.D., Chief of Surgery, Boston General Hospital. Abigail lowered the letter slowly, aware of 3 pairs of eyes watching her intently. Catherine was the first to break the silence. "What does it say, Mama? Are you going somewhere?" The anxiety in the child's voice pulled at Abigail's heart. "No, sweetheart. It's just a letter from my old hospital in Boston." "What do they want?" Nathaniel asked, his tone carefully neutral. Abigail handed him the letter, watching as he read it quickly, his expression growing more guarded with each line. When he finished, he passed it to Thomas without comment. "Well, the blacksmith muttered as he scanned the contents. "That's quite an offer. Head nurse of a new department, and after they let you go, too." Catherine looked between the adults' confusion evident. "I don't understand. What does it mean?" Abigail chose her words carefully. "It means the hospital where I used to work wants me to come back. They're building a new section for women and children, and they'd like me to help run it." "In Boston?" Catherine's voice rose in alarm. "But that's so far away." "Yes, it is." Abigail reached for the child's hand. "But don't worry, nothing has been decided." Nathaniel stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the wooden floor. "I need to finish that load of firewood. Thomas, care to lend a hand before you head back to town?" The sudden shift caught everyone by surprise. Thomas glanced from Nathaniel to Abigail, understanding dawning in his weathered face. "Sure thing. Could use the exercise after that ride." After the men had departed, Catherine crawled into Abigail's lap, something she rarely did anymore except at bedtime. "You won't go, will you?" she whispered. "You promised to stay forever." Abigail stroked the child's hair, conflicting emotions churning within her. "I did promise, and I meant it. This letter just surprised me." "Because you used to want that job very much," Catherine said, her perception startling Abigail once again. "Yes, before I came here it would have been everything I wanted." She hugged Catherine closer. But that was a different time, a different life. Yet even as she spoke the reassuring words, Abigail felt the undeniable pull of what the letter represented, not just a job, but validation. Recognition of her skills and contributions. The opportunity to implement changes she had advocated for years to improve medical care for countless women and children. It was the career she had trained for, fought for, sacrificed for. The purpose that had sustained her through war and loss and hardship. Could she truly dismiss it so easily? Catherine seemed to sense her inner turmoil. "It's all right, if you want to think about it," she said with a maturity beyond her years. "Papa always says important decisions shouldn't be rushed." Abigail kissed the top of the child's head. "Your father is a very wise man." "He'll be sad if you go," Catherine continued, her voice small. "He smiles all the time now. Before he only smiled sometimes." The simple observation pierced Abigail's heart. "I've noticed that too." And they sat together in silence for a time, each lost in thought. Finally, Catherine slid from Abigail's lap. "I'm going to finish sorting the seeds. The carrots still need to be planted." Left alone, Abigail reread the letter, trying to separate her emotional response from practical considerations. The position offered was prestigious, the salary undoubtedly generous. It represented professional recognition she had long sought. Yet accepting would mean uprooting the life she had built here, a life that, despite its challenges and limitations, had brought her a happiness she hadn't known was possible. Could the family relocate to Boston? The thought seemed absurd on its face. Nathaniel's livelihood was tied to this land, this community. His carpentry skills would certainly find use in the city, but he would be just another craftsman there, not the respected artisan he was in Red Pine. And Catherine could, the free-spirited child who built snow forts and planted gardens, adapt to the confined, structured life of a city girl. Outside, she could hear the rhythmic thunk of the axe as Nathaniel and Thomas split logs. The sound was so familiar now, part of the tapestry of daily life that had woven itself around her. Could she really leave this behind for hospital corridors and the cramped confines of Boston? When Thomas departed an hour later, he gave Abigail's hand a sympathetic squeeze. "Difficult choice," he murmured. "Martha always says the hardest decisions are between two goods, not between good and evil." "Wise words," Abigail agreed. "Please thank Martha for me when you return." "I will. And Abigail." He hesitated, then continued, "Whatever you decide, know that you've brought light to this place. That matters." After he had gone, an awkward silence fell between Abigail and Nathaniel. He returned to his woodpile while she and Catherine planted the sorted seeds in neat rows. The usual, easy conversation was notably absent, each family member wrapped in private thoughts. That evening, after Catherine had been tucked into bed, Nathaniel finally broached the subject. As they sat before the fire, he, whittling a small figure she mending a torn shirt. "When will you reply to Dr. Ellsworth?" he asked his knife, pausing mid-stroke. Abigail set her sewing aside. "I haven't decided yet." "But you're considering it." "Not a question, but a statement." "I feel I owe it that much, yes. It's not an offer that comes along every day." Nathaniel resumed his whittling tiny curls of wood falling to the floor. "It's what you trained for, what you worked toward for years." "Yes." She studied his profile shadowed in the firelight. "But that was before. Before Catherine's letter brought you here." A small smile touched his lips despite the tension. "Before our unconventional courtship. Before I found a family I never expected," Abigail added softly. "Before I found you." He set the carving and knife aside, turning to face her fully. "I won't stand in your way, Abigail. If this is what you want, what you need, I won't hold you back." The quiet dignity in his voice moved her deeply. "Is that what you think I want? To leave?" "I think," he said carefully, "that you're a gifted healer whose talents are largely wasted here. A few neighbors with winter coughs, the occasional injury, it's nothing compared to what you could accomplish at a major hospital." His assessment was painfully accurate. Though she had found ways to use her skills in Red Pine, treating everything from childbirth complications to mining injuries, the scope was limited. The impact she could have at Boston General would be exponentially greater. "And what about us?" she asked. "What about our family?" Nathaniel reached for her hand, his calloused palm rough against her skin. "We would miss you terribly. Catherine would be devastated, at least initially. But children adapt, and we would find a way to continue." "You speak as if I've already decided to go," Abigail said, withdrawing her hand. "As if you expect me to choose the hospital over our marriage." "No." His voice softened. "I speak as a man who loves you enough to acknowledge that you had a life, a purpose before we met. A man who doesn't want you to resent him someday for the opportunities you sacrificed." The selflessness of his position brought tears to Abigail's eyes. And what about what I want? Have you considered that I might choose this life, choose you and Catherine not out of obligation, but because it brings me joy? Does it truly? The vulnerability in his question cracked something open inside her. Enough to make up for what you're giving up. I don't know, she admitted honestly. I love our life here. I love you and Catherine with a depth that sometimes frightens me. But the work I did before healing teaching, improving care for those who needed it most, that mattered too. Nathaniel nodded slowly. Then you should consider the offer seriously. Take the time you need to decide. And if I choose to stay, will you always wonder if I regret it? I might, he acknowledged. Just as if you go, I'll always wonder if we could have been enough for you. The brutal honesty of the exchange left them both raw. Abigail moved to his chair, kneeling beside it, to take his hands in hers. I want you to understand something, she said intently. Whatever I decide, it won't be a choice between loving you and pursuing my calling. I refuse to see it in those terms. How else can you see it? He asked. Boston is 2,000 miles away. I don't know yet. But I believe there must be a way forward that doesn't require such an absolute sacrifice from either of us. Nathaniel lifted one hand to cup her cheek. I hope you're right. That night, lying beside him in the darkness, Abigail tried to imagine returning to Boston alone. The familiar streets and buildings, the hospital with its distinctive smell of carbolic acid and clean linen, the ordered routine of rounds and treatments. Once it had been her entire world. But now those mental images felt strangely hollow, like scenes from a play she had once performed in but no longer remembered clearly. What would Boston be without Catherine's laughter, without Nathaniel's quiet strength beside her? Without this home they had built together, yet the reverse was equally difficult to contemplate. Could she truly set aside the skills she had honed through years of training and hard experience? The chance to implement changes that might save countless lives. The professional recognition she had long deserved. Sleep eluded her as she wrestled with these questions, her mind turning them over and over like stones in a stream, seeking an answer that remained frustratingly out of reach. Dawn found her still awake, watching the first pale light filter through the attic window. Beside her, Nathaniel slept peacefully, one arm thrown protectively across her waist, even in slumber. The simple gesture of connection moved her unexpectedly, tears pricking her eyes. How had this happened? How had a deception, a blizzard, and a hidden letter converged to create this life she now found so precious? And how could she reconcile that precious gift with the calling that had defined her for so long? The answer, when it finally came to her, was so simple, she nearly laughed aloud. She slipped carefully from bed, pulled on her robe, and descended to the main room. At the small desk in the corner, she found paper, pen, and ink. Words flowed from her hand as the rising sun gradually illuminated the homestead. When she finished, the letter sat before her, not a rejection or an acceptance, but something different entirely. A third path she hadn't previously considered. The sound of footsteps on the stairs announced Nathaniel's awakening. He appeared in the doorway, hair tousled from sleep concern evident in his face. "You're up early," he observed, moving to stand behind her. His gaze fell on the letter. "You've made your decision, then?" "Yes." Abigail stood, turning to face him. "But probably not the one you're expecting." Curiosity replaced concern. "May I?" She gestured to the letter. "Please." Nathaniel sat at the desk, reading quickly. As he progressed, his expression shifted from curiosity to surprise, then thoughtful consideration. When he finished, he looked up at her with new respect in his eyes. "This is unexpected."
But possible, don't you think? Abigail asked, unable to keep the hopeful note from her voice. He read certain passages again more slowly. Ambitious, challenging, but yes, potentially possible. I can't abandon my calling, she explained. But I won't abandon my family either. This offers a way to honor both. Nathaniel stood gathering her into his arms. It will mean significant changes for all of us. Yes, but perhaps changes we're ready for. She rested her head against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart. What do you think, truly? He was silent for a long moment, considering. I think, he said finally, that my wife is a remarkably creative problem solver, and that this proposal has merit worth exploring. Relief flooded through her. You're not opposed. How could I be? You've found a potential path that respects both your professional gifts and our family bonds. He kissed her forehead gently. It won't be simple or easy, but then nothing worthwhile ever is. Should we discuss it with Catherine? Abigail asked. I don't want to raise her hopes if it proves impossible. Not yet, I think. Let's make some preliminary inquiries first, see if the foundations can be laid. They stood together in the early morning light, the letter between them representing not an ending, but a new beginning. Outside, spring continued its relentless advance, transforming the landscape day by day from winter's dormancy to vibrant life. Change, Abigail reflected, was the only constant. The wisdom lay in directing that change, rather than simply submitting to it, in finding the courage to forge new paths when existing ones proved insufficient. Summer arrived with a riot of wildflowers across the Wyoming plains and the sweet scent of pine resin in the warming air. The Thorne homestead hummed with activity, garden plots thriving under Abigail and Catherine's care. Nathaniel's workshop, busy with commissioned pieces and preparations underway for changes none of them could have imagined 6 months earlier. The reply from Dr. Ellsworth had come swiftly once Abigail's counterproposal reached Boston. His initial skepticism had given way to cautious interest, then active support as the concept took shape through their correspondence. The hospital board required convincing, but Ellsworth's advocacy proved persuasive. By mid-June, the plan had solidified enough to share with Catherine. The three Thornes sat at their kitchen table after supper one evening, the windows open to catch the sweet summer breeze. We have something important to discuss with you. Nathaniel began exchanging a glance with Abigail. It involves changes for our family. Catherine's expression immediately turned wary. What kind of changes? Is it about the hospital letter? Yes, partly, Abigail confirmed, but not in the way you might fear. She reached for the child's hand. I'm not leaving you or your father. That was never truly an option. Relief washed over Catherine's face. Then what's happening? Nathaniel leaned forward. The hospital in Boston still wants your mother's expertise, but instead of her going there, they've agreed to try something new, something that might help many people here in Wyoming. A frontier medical training program, Abigail explained, excitement coloring her voice, funded by Boston General, but based here in the West where it's desperately needed. Catherine's brow furrowed as she processed this information. Like a school for nurses here. Exactly like that. Abigail squeezed her hand. Dr. Ellsworth has secured funding to establish a small training center where I can teach frontier women modern nursing techniques. Women who already serve as midwives and healers in isolated communities, but have never had formal training. And that's not all, Nathaniel added. The program needs housing for students, teaching spaces, examination rooms, buildings that I'll help design and construct. We'd stay in Red Pine, Catherine asked, hope dawning in her eyes. Not quite, Abigail said gently.
The program needs to be in a larger settlement to attract students from across the territory. We'd be moving to Cheyenne. Cheyenne? Catherine's eyes widened. The big city. Nathaniel nodded. It's still small compared to Boston or even Denver, but yes, it's considerably larger than Red Pine. Would we have a house like this one? Different, but yes, our own home. I'll build it myself with space for your mother's teaching and a workshop for me. Nathaniel's expression grew serious. It would mean leaving this homestead, Katie, the place where you were born, where your mother, where Hannah is buried. The mention of her birth mother sobered Catherine. Would we still visit her grave sometimes? Absolutely, Abigail assured her. It's only a day's journey. We could come for special occasions to tend the flowers and remember her. Catherine fell silent, absorbing the magnitude of the proposed changes. Finally, she looked up, her gaze moving between her parents. Would you be happy, Mama, teaching other ladies to be nurses? The simple, perceptive question caught Abigail by surprise. Yes, I believe I would. Very happy. And Papa? Would you like building in the city instead of here? Nathaniel considered his answer carefully. Change is always challenging, Katie. But I've discovered that home isn't a particular piece of land or set of walls. It's the people we love. And he reached across the table to take Abigail's free hand, completing the circle. Where you and your mother are, that's where I want to be. Catherine nodded solemnly, decision apparently reached. Then I think we should go. But can we bring the rocking horse you made me? And my books? And can I have my own garden plot in Cheyenne, too? The practical questions broke the tension, drawing laughter from both adults. Yes to all of that, Nathaniel promised. We'll take everything important with us. When would we leave? Catherine asked. Not until autumn, Abigail explained. There are many arrangements to make first. Finding suitable land in Cheyenne, securing final approval from the hospital board, recruiting initial students. And harvesting our garden, Catherine added seriously. We can't waste all those vegetables we planted. Absolutely not, Abigail agreed, smiling at the child's priorities. We'll preserve everything we can to take with us. The conversation shifted to practical details, what their new home might look like, what Catherine's schooling would entail in Cheyenne, how the training program would function. The child's initial anxiety transformed gradually into excitement as the possibilities of their new life took shape in her imagination. Later, after Catherine had been tucked into bed with promises of further discussion. Tomorrow, Abigail and Nathaniel sat on the porch steps, watching fireflies dance against the deepening twilight. She took it better than I expected, Nathaniel observed, his arm around Abigail's waist. Children can be remarkably adaptable. She trusts us, Abigail replied simply. That makes all the difference. I worry about Hannah's grave, he admitted after a moment. Being so far away, unable to tend it regularly, Abigail rested her head against his shoulder. We'll make arrangements with Thomas and Martha. They'll see it's properly cared for between our visits. I know. It's just, she'll always be part of our family, Abigail assured him. Distance doesn't change that. Nathaniel pressed a kiss to her hair. Thank you for understanding. Of course I understand. Hannah gave you Catherine. She's the foundation of the family I've joined, not a threat to it. They sat in comfortable silence for a time, each lost in private thoughts. The night air carried the scent of pine and earth, of growing things and possibilities. I never imagined this path, Nathaniel said finally. After Hannah died, I thought my life was set raising Catherine alone, building furniture, keeping this homestead going until I was too old to manage it. And now I find myself embarking on an entirely new chapter, building structures for healing instead of just homes and furniture, moving to a city I've visited only a handful of times. He tightened his arm around her. All because a determined woman survived a blizzard and found her way to our door.
Abigail smiled at the simplification. All because your equally determined daughter took matters into her own hands.
There is that, he acknowledged with a chuckle. Between the two of you, I never stood a chance.
Do you regret it? Abigail asked, suddenly serious.
Any of it.
Nathaniel turned to face her fully, his expression visible in the soft light spilling from the windows.
Not for a moment. The path wasn't what I expected, but the destination. He cupped her face gently. The destination is everything I never dared hope for. The weeks that followed brought a flurry of activity as plans solidified. A telegram from Dr. Ellsworth confirmed final approval from the hospital board, along with the first installment of funds to secure land and begin construction in Cheyenne. Nathaniel made 2 trips to the growing city, returning with architectural sketches and a deed to 3 acres on the city's eastern edge. Room for the training facility, our home, and even a small garden for Catherine. He reported, spreading the plans on the table for his family to examine. The lot backs up to a small creek with cottonwoods for shade in summer. Word of their impending departure spread quickly through Red Pine. Reactions ranged from dismay at losing valued community members to pride that their nurse would be training others in the territorial capital. Martha Wheeler organized a farewell gathering for early September, though the actual move remained weeks away. It's not as if you're disappearing forever, she told Abigail as they prepared preserves together in the Wheeler kitchen. Cheyenne's close enough for visits, but folks want to show their appreciation before you go. The gesture touched Abigail deeply. In less than a year, she had become part of this frontier community in ways she'd never anticipated.
These people had welcomed her, supported her unlikely marriage, and now celebrated her professional opportunity with genuine goodwill.
I'll miss this place, she admitted, sealing another jar of strawberry preserves. The simplicity, the closeness to nature, the people. And we'll miss you, Martha replied. But you're doing important work, child. Bringing modern medical knowledge to women who've been making do with folk remedies and guesswork. It matters.
I hope so.
Abigail labeled the jar carefully. There's no guarantee the program will succeed. We're attempting something quite new. Martha snorted dismissively. If anyone can make it work, it's you. I've never seen such determination in a body since Thomas decided to court me despite my father's objections. The comparison made Abigail laugh. I take that as high praise coming from you. As summer waned, preparations intensified.
Nathaniel spent 2 weeks in Cheyenne, overseeing the foundation work for both their home and the training facility, leaving Abigail and Catherine to begin the bittersweet task of sorting what would go to their new home and what would remain behind.
Papa says we can't take everything.
Catherine sighed, surveying her collection of treasures, pine cones, interesting rocks, bird feathers, and similar childhood artifacts.
But how do I choose the most precious items?
Abigail advised, helping the girl organize her belongings, the ones with special memories attached. The rest we can leave with the homestead as part of its history.
Like we're leaving pieces of ourselves here, Catherine said thoughtfully.
Exactly like that.
Abigail was continually impressed by the child's perception. This place will always be part of who we are, even if we don't live here anymore. August brought an unexpected visitor, Victor Hayward, arriving unannounced in a rented carriage from Cheyenne. His appearance initially alarmed Catherine, who feared a renewed attempt to separate her from her family. But Victor's demeanor proved considerably warmer than during his previous visit.
I received word of your venture from colleagues at Massachusetts General, he explained as they sat in the main room. A frontier nursing program is quite revolutionary. I'm impressed by your initiative, Mrs. Thorne. Thank you, Abigail replied cautiously. It's still in its early stages. Precisely why I've come. Victor straightened his already impeccable waistcoat. I represent certain Boston interests who believe your program has merit beyond what Boston General has recognized. Nathaniel leaned forward, interest piqued. What sort of interests? Philanthropic ones, primarily. Families with significant resources and a desire to improve conditions in the Western Territories. Victor withdrew several documents from his leather portfolio. They've authorized me to offer additional funding specifically for expanded facilities and scholarships for promising students of limited means. Abigail exchanged a startled glance with Nathaniel. That's extraordinarily generous, Mr. Hayward. May I ask what prompted this offer? Victor's expression softened slightly as his gaze moved to Catherine, who was pretending not to listen while arranging wildflowers in a vase nearby. Let's say I've gained a new appreciation for frontier resilience, and perhaps I owe some amends for my previous presumptions. The unexpected ally proved valuable in the weeks that followed. Victor's connections and business acumen helped navigate regulatory hurdles and secure additional resources for the nascent program. Before returning east, he made a final gesture that moved the family deeply, a visit to Hannah's grave, where he placed a small stone marker engraved with her full name and the words, "Beloved sister, wife, and mother." She would be pleased with the path you've chosen, he told Nathaniel afterward. Hannah always believed in helping others find their way. By early September, the garden had yielded its bounty most preserved for winter use in their new home. The community farewell gathering transformed into an impromptu harvest festival, with nearly every resident of Red Pine contributing food well-wishes or practical gifts for the journey ahead. Thomas and Martha Wheeler presented them with a handcrafted sign reading, "Thorne School of Frontier Nursing." Thomas's ironwork combined with Martha's painting skills. Reverend Morrison offered a blessing for their new venture. Even the saloon owner contributed, presenting Nathaniel with an envelope containing a surprising amount of cash collected from the boys for new medical books. "You've made a difference here," Thomas told Abigail as the celebration wound down. "Changed how folks think about caring for the sick. That's a legacy that'll continue long after you've gone." The day of departure arrived with the first hint of autumn chill in the air. The homestead stood nearly empty, most of their belongings already transported to Cheyenne in previous trips. What remained fit into 2 wagons, one carrying the family and personal items too precious to send ahead, the other loaded with Nathaniel's essential tools, and the last of Catherine's carefully selected treasures. The final moments were the hardest. Catherine insisted on a last visit to her mother's grave, where the 3 of them stood in solemn silence before the small wooden cross, now accompanied by Victor's stone marker. "Goodbye, Mama," Catherine whispered, placing a small bouquet of late wildflowers at the base. "I'll come back to visit. I promise." Nathaniel knelt beside his daughter. "Your mother would be so proud of you, Katie, of your courage and your kind heart." "Do you think she'd mind that I call Abigail Mama now, too?" The child asked a question that had clearly troubled her. "Not at all," Nathaniel assured her. "Hannah wanted you to be loved and happy above all else. She would be grateful that you found another mother to care for you when she couldn't." Abigail blinked back tears, moved by the simple truth in his words. This moment crystallized something she had felt growing throughout their preparations, not just anticipation for their new beginning, but gratitude for the foundations that had made it possible. Hannah's love for her family, Catherine's brave deception, James's final letter.
each strand woven together to create the tapestry of their present. As they prepared to depart, Abigail took one last walk through the empty house, her footsteps echoing on the wooden floors. In each room, memories whispered Catherine's nightmare that first night, Nathaniel's rare smile by the fire their wedding day with pine boughs decorating the mantel. The sewing room where she had slept as a stranger, the main room where she had become a wife. The bedroom where Catherine had first called her Mama. Outside, Nathaniel waited by the lead wagon, giving her this moment alone. When she finally emerged, he studied her face with quiet understanding. "Ready?" he asked simply. Abigail took a deep breath, taking in the homestead one final time, the slanting roof, the workshop where Nathaniel had crafted beauty from raw wood, the pine trees standing sentinel behind it all. "Yes," she said, surprised to find she meant it. "I'm ready." The journey to Cheyenne took 2 days, with an overnight camp beside a stream where Catherine insisted on unboxing her music box, now fully repaired to play its melody beneath the star-strewn Wyoming sky. As the familiar notes of Shenandoah drifted through the camp, Abigail found herself humming along the song, no longer tinged with past sorrows but rich with new meaning. "Oh, Shenandoah, I long to see you, away you rolling river. Oh, Shenandoah, I long to see you, away I'm bound away, cross the wide Missouri." Catherine's clear voice joined in, followed unexpectedly by Nathaniel's deeper tones. The three-part harmony rose toward the brilliant stars, a family's song of journey and hope. Cheyenne appeared on the horizon late the following afternoon, a rapidly growing frontier city with newly paved streets, substantial brick buildings, and an energy that contrasted sharply with Red Pine's rustic tranquility. As they approached the eastern outskirts, Nathaniel directed the wagons toward a rise overlooking a small creek lined with cottonwood trees. "There," he said, pointing ahead, "our new home." Abigail followed his gesture, gasping softly at what awaited them. The foundation she had seen in sketches had transformed into a nearly complete structure, a sprawling 2-story building of logs and timber, its design combining frontier practicality with touches of elegance. Large windows promised abundant natural light, while a wide porch wrapped around 3 sides offering views of both the creek and the distant mountains. "Nathaniel," she breathed, "it's magnificent. How—" "I had help," he admitted as they drew closer. Several carpenters from Cheyenne volunteered their time after hearing about the nursing program, and Thomas came down twice to assist with the heavy work. Catherine stood in the wagon, bouncing with excitement. "Is that really our house, Papa?" "It's so big. Home and school together," he confirmed. "The west wing will be your mother's teaching space and examination rooms. The east wing, our living quarters. And that smaller building," he pointed to a structure behind the main house, "will be my new workshop." As the wagons pulled into the yard, Abigail noticed details that hadn't been visible from a distance. Above the main entrance hung a sign matching the one Thomas and Martha had given them. Window boxes waited for plantings, and a small plot had been tilled for Catherine's promised garden. Most touching of all, flanking the front steps, stood 2 rocking chairs, not new ones, but the same chairs from their homestead porch, where they had sat countless evenings watching sunsets over the pines. "You brought them," Abigail said softly. "Some things needed to come with us," Nathaniel replied. "Reminders of where we began." As they unloaded essential items for their first night, Abigail felt a curious blend of emotions, the bitter sweetness of leaving their first home, tempered by excitement for what lay ahead. The buildings surrounding them represented not just shelter, but purpose, a place of healing and learning, a new chapter in all their lives. After a simple meal in their partially furnished kitchen,
Nathaniel led them on a tour of the teaching spaces, classrooms with demonstration tables, examination rooms equipped with modern medical furniture shipped from Boston, and a small library awaiting the medical texts Dr. Ellsworth had promised. The first students arrive in 3 weeks, Abigail noted, trailing her fingers along a smooth wooden counter. We have much to prepare before then. We'll be ready, Nathaniel assured her. The community is eager to help. They ended the tour in what would be their family sitting room, currently containing only a few chairs and a small table where Catherine had already placed her treasured music box. Through the windows they could see the creek glimmering in the last light of day, cottonwood leaves rustling in the gentle breeze. "What do you think, Katie?" Nathaniel asked as his daughter explored the space. "Will this do for our new home?" The child considered the question with appropriate seriousness. "It's different," she said finally. "But good different, I think. Like when you plant new seeds and don't know exactly what will grow, but you're excited to find out." Her simple wisdom drew smiles from both adults. "That's exactly right," Abigail agreed, drawing the girl into a gentle embrace. "We're planting new seeds here in your garden plot, in this home in the school. All of us together." As darkness fell, they lit lamps in the main room, their warm glow creating islands of light in the unfamiliar space. Tomorrow would bring the work of truly settling in, arranging furniture, unpacking crates, transforming this beautiful structure into a home. But tonight was for reflection, for acknowledging the journey that had brought them here. Catherine eventually dozed off in Nathaniel's lap, the excitement of the day catching up with her at last. He carried her to her new bedroom, returning to find Abigail standing by the window gazing out at the star-filled sky. "Having second thoughts?" he asked softly, coming to stand beside her. She shook her head. "No, just marveling at how life unfolds in ways we never anticipate. When I built that homestead, I thought I was creating a permanent foundation for my family," Nathaniel reflected. "I never imagined we'd leave it." "The foundation wasn't the building," Abigail said, turning to face him. "It was the love you created within it. That travels with us." He drew her into his arms, his expression contemplative. "A year ago, I was a widower, focused only on surviving each day for Catherine's sake. Now I find myself helping establish a frontier medical school with a wife who appeared at my door through my daughter's deception." "Life does have a sense of humor," Abigail agreed, smiling. "A year ago, I was a dismissed nurse, boarding a train west to marry a stranger carrying a music box with a hidden message I never knew existed. And now," she gestured around them at the home he had built at the school they would create together. "Now I'm exactly where I'm meant to be, with work that matters and a family I cherish." Nathaniel's kiss was tender, a promise renewed. "Welcome home, Mrs. Thorne." Outside, the Wyoming wind sang softly through the cottonwoods, a different melody than the pines of their homestead, but beautiful in its own right. Inside, the small family slept peacefully, anchored by bonds forged through loss, deception, sacrifice, and ultimately love-proof that even the most unexpected beginnings can lead to the truest of homes. In her dreams, Abigail heard Catherine's voice singing the old river song, no longer a lament, but a celebration. A song of journeys completed and journeys just beginning. A melody that had guided her through blizzard and uncertainty to the family she had never known she sought. Catherine's song, their song, home.